Kia ora and welcome to the Niche Cast. We're from theniche-cache.com, otherwise known as the land of Aotearoa, the greatest sporting nation in the world, and we are here to chat through a dumper, legendary Super Smash Finals weekend. We got plenty of football to discuss. Chris Wood also doing his own legendary shit. And the Football Ferns named the squad. We've got some junior rugby league matters to update. And Zyon Maiu'u's gone to the Bulldogs. He left the Warriors to go to the Bulldogs, which is a pretty interesting move that's happened just before the start of the season. So we're going to discuss that as well. We get real deep into Aotearoa sport, so deep into Aotearoa sport that we have to discuss the Luka Doncic trade. It's mandatory. Anyone talking sport, you got to discuss the groundbreaking Luka Doncic trade. But you, of course, Nick of the Wildcard, are a Dallas Mavericks fan. Maybe even a diehard. Maybe even a fanboy. So I think I saw you out there carrying the casket, the coffin of Luka Doncic to the Dallas Mavericks center. I think I saw you in the background putting up a few posters like R.I.P. Luka, love you Luka, all that
Laying
stuff.
some flowers, lighting candles, all that stuff.
And I was contemplating this as I tend to do about sporting matters, specifically Aotearoa sporting matters, and this is intertwined with Aotearoa because you live in Aotearoa, and the idea that I came up with involves a team in a competition that stretches into Aotearoa as well. And I was like, man, the thing that's kind of similar, like a similar example about Dallas Mavericks trading away Luka Doncic would be if the St. George Illawarra Dragons traded away Ben Hunt. And they didn't
And
do
Zach
that.
Lomax?
Well, in both instances, Ben Hunt and Zach Lomax, two of the better players for the Dragons, wanted to leave the Dragons, so the Dragons didn't trade them away, but you're also a Dragons fan, so I'm just checking in. Are you all good considering all your teams are losing all their players? What's doing?
Yeah, those are probably two of the teams that have made it quite difficult over the years. In particular, the Dragons. The Mavericks at least have had some glorious moments, but both of them have something in common, which is that like early on when I was supporting them, like within a year or two of getting fully into each of those teams, they won championships, and it really feels like there's been nothing since that that comes close to that, especially with the Dragons. Like Dragons haven't got anywhere near that again since. I think the year after they were still decent. They had one more year with Wayne Bennett, but um semi-finals or something like that. But it's not even just diminishing returns. It's like I got glorious moments right at the start of my fandom of each of those teams and just have been punished for it ever since, The the Doncic thing, I don't even like there's just so much about that doesn't make sense that I don't even really want to talk about it because I don't think I could come up with anything coherent. But yeah, the thing that did sting me about that, well, not sting me, that struck me because that happened, and then was it the same day or was it the day before the Breakers played? I can't remember which, but there was a parallel there where I was thinking, well, the Breakers also did something kind of crazy with their own roster moves where let's get rid of our best defender and see if we can't build on this 7-3 start that we've had, and then they go like they got one game left, so I think it must be 3-24, I think, since then. No, not 24, 3-14 since then, something along those lines. Yeah, and maybe it's just something about basketball. I'm not sure what it is, but some of these things, some of these moves don't seem to make a whole lot of logical sense. But at least while we're talking about transfery stuff, at least I've had the Flying Kiwis football transfers to focus on in the last few days, because that stuff has at least gone nuts in a good way. Luka Doncic stuff, nuts in a very bad way. And I think yeah, on a personal sense, that might be one where I have to tune it out for a little bit and not focus on the Dallas Mavericks for a wee while. But that's okay because Steven Adams is back in his back towards his glorious best, albeit in a smaller role, but he's at least up there. So maybe I just shift my attention fully towards the Steven Adams bandwagon as far as the NBA goes.
And it is quite funny because you might struggle to get away from the Luka Doncic chat, considering how many reaction podcasts, reaction videos there were, which is absolutely ridiculous. We're a bit more lo-fi, we're a bit more chilled, we're a bit more, let's just not do what everyone else is doing. See, we don't do reaction podcasts, which is good and bad, but who cares? We're just doing ourselves. But it is funny seeing so many reaction podcasts talking about the same shit, and it's like, does everyone listen to all these shows?
Yeah.
Do they pick one? Like, what's the differentiating factor between this one and that one? But now I'm just overthinking matters. But yes, Nottingham Forest will not be trading Chris Wood. I can guarantee that.
Not only that, but it seems like they want to bring in more New Zealanders around him because they've already got Marko Stamenic hanging around out on loan and potentially coming back. I'm sure he'll at least get a preseason with them next season, whether he stays in the Premier League team or not, or goes out on another loan, who knows. But I mean, we're on the street, and this might even be like breaking news at some point during the podcast while we're recording. It sounds like they're pretty keen on bringing Tyler Bindon in as well. So could you imagine that if Nottingham Forest someday had a spine of Tyler Bindon at centre back, Marko Stamenic in midfield, Chris Wood up front? That's a perfect Premier League team. If only they'd signed Alex Paulson, actually. They missed out on that one. They let him get to Bournemouth.
Bournemouth could still loan him out to Nottingham Forest or something. Kind of loan move would happen there. And it is a reminder, as I tend to say every podcast, it seems, of just how goofy American sport is.
Yeah.
Because there aren't many other sporting competitions around the world where the trade stuff happens. And Luka Doncic, he had no say. Now, all the American athletes, they try to dictate trade on their terms because they're fighting the power, but they're really just overusing their power. The whole American stuff is just super goofy. But you can be Luka Doncic, best player on your team, one of the best players in the NBA, and you just get brushed aside with no like rhyme or reason, or you don't even have a choice. So it is a reminder to be grateful here in Aotearoa, the NRL, those type of competitions, even maybe the Premier League, where you still have a lot of goofy maneuvers that can be made, but at least you might have a say in where your career goes. At least you...
Or even just know about it, rather than just being told it's already happened. Like, I mean, apparently Coach Jason Kidd didn't even know about it until the last moments when they were just polishing it off. Like, what kind of organization are you running at that point where like the player himself doesn't know until after it's happened and the coach doesn't even know until right before it happens? You're just not going to get that in anywhere other than America.
So shout out to America.
Yeah, shout out to the Americans.
You're doing some great stuff over there. I see you. I see you putting in the great work, sharing positivity, love, and light to the rest of the world. Heavy dose of sarcasm there, but we are the niche cache, and yesterday we delivered our typically insightful newsletter via Substack, thenichecache.substack.com, which is full of Aotearoa sporting notes and nuggets, much of which we are going to discuss here in our podcast. So if you sign up to our newsletter via Substack, thenichecache.substack.com, you get a free Aotearoa Sporting Dispatch every Monday and Friday evening, and then there's the option to upgrade to a paid Substack subscription where you can then access our bonus podcast, which we deliver once a week, later in the week, usually on a Thursday, and we will still be trying to get our bonus podcast done on Thursday, which is the 6th of February, otherwise known as Waitangi Day. Shout out to all the colonizers out there, and shout out to the locals who got colonized. We appreciate you both to varying degrees. Of course, You can also access our bonus podcast on Patreon. Big up to all the Patreon whānau. We did lose a member of the Patreon whānau though, so that was a bummer. But we take it on the chin and we keep rocking and rolling. It's a couple of dollars a month for both the Patreon and the paid Substack subscription. You get the bonus podcast sent out through both channels. If you can't afford that, it's all good. We got the free newsletter, everything we're doing here, the podcast, the blogs, the newsletter, the clips. They're all free. We're just out here spreading the gospel of Aotearoa sporting excellence. And if you do want to make a one-off donation, you can... Just a sick little motorbike driving past. You can make a one-off donation through Buy Me a Coffee as well. That goes hard. So shout out to anyone who is basically just funding what we do here. And we might just throw out some mana waves and positive energy, the prayers, if you're that way inclined. To anyone, if you can chip in, please consider it, because we're just doing the best we can around here. But we still probably won't be doing those crazy reaction podcasts. Like, we're just out here doing our lo-fi thing, because when we're kind of online for the Aotearoa sporting matters. We're not necessarily online to be online. We're just out here sharing the Aotearoa sporting insights, and then we get offline. To be honest, I'm just going to say fuck. We get the fuck offline. That's who we are. That's what we do. We get on the bush. We get on the land of Aotearoa and chill out. With that in mind, I think the only place to go from here is mindfulness.
Indeed. And I reckon this one might have some potency if you do happen to be out wandering in the bush. This is from Arthur Conan Doyle, the man who invented Sherlock Holmes, which also is some potent context for what he's about to say with this quote: "The world is full of obvious things which nobody by any chance ever observes."
That's definitely true, and that is telling for young old Sherlock Holmes, because he's seeing. I imagine that's what you're referring to. He's seeing all the clues, all the obvious things that everyone overlooks, and he solves the mystery, and you can solve the mystery of life as well by just being a bit more aware of all the little details that seem obvious, but they're not, because no one else notices them, which in my realms is that Amelia Kerr is one of the tippy-top legends in Aotearoa sport. It seems really obvious. She's the best batter, the best bowler, the best fielder, and to be honest, right now, she's the best captain in Aotearoa cricket. She's winning international awards. She's winning Commonwealth Games medals. She's winning T20 World Cups. It should be obvious that Amelia Kerr is already one of the greatest athletes New Zealand has ever produced. But it doesn't seem as obvious as it should seem. So I'm here to tell you that Amelia Kerr is doing legendary crackerjack shit, and she deserves to be put on that pedestal, which we will do in a jiffy. But any more thoughts about your mindfulness there that I just interjected with? I'm sure you'll agree.
I do agree.
Timely
I've been
praise
thinking
of
about that
Amelia
a lot. Because Chris Wood is also doing equally incredible things, and I was thinking about this while I was drafting up the Flying Kiwi stuff for this week, where it's like this, what he's doing right now will be talked about for generations in New Zealand football circles. Like, this is the season for him. This is you don't have to think about what he did last time, what he's going to do in the future. It's like these are the moments right now where every couple of weeks he does something incredible, like a hat trick on the weekend. And I think that is being recognized, but the amount of the Halberg Awards or something must be coming up, because people are talking about this, trying to put it in frame of competing these athletes against each other. But I'm not seeing Amelia Kerr's name mentioned in those conversations nearly enough. I'm like, right now it's Chris Wood and Amelia Kerr. I don't know who else is quite operating at the same level of peakness, but also just the consistency sustained. Kerr's been incredible for months on months on months. I don't know, it seems to me that's a little bit undeniable, but then maybe that is one of those obvious things that people just aren't seeing, and that's why we got to do our, not reaction podcast, but our whatever the opposite of that. Not the quick fire hot takes, but the sit back, think about it, throw out the considered opinion podcast, and say Amelia Kerr is the best New Zealand cricketer right now, and maybe one of the 2 or 3 best cricketers, full stop, on the planet, like over the last 12 months. It's incredible stuff, and it's incredible stuff in, like you say, with bat, with ball, and field, with captaincy for Wellington, for the White Ferns, and T20s and ODIs. Like it's in T20 competitions overseas, in tournaments and bilateral series. Like it's across the board. It's just, unstoppable. And while I've been savoring and going very, very deep on a lot of the Chris Wood stuff, I'm also observing the Amelia Kerr stuff from a little bit more of a distance and thinking, like, this is equal and parallel. This is equal intensity of just, sheer Aotearoa sporting quality.
Yeah, hold fire on the Amelia Kerr stuff. Got plenty more notes and wrinkles to bring up in the Super Smash segment, but let's expand on the Aotearoa sporting greatness parameters, the boundaries that we're setting, because there's no one in rugby league who's tapping that tier right now. Like, okay, you're winning a bunch of NRL championships, so James Fisher-Harris is there, Moses Leota's there, but there isn't the Aotearoa Kiwi success to push those players into the upper echelon. Because we got to balance it out. Like, yeah, you're winning NRL championships, and like no one else is winning NRL championships recently, right? So you can't include any other. Like, there's no Warriors players who are in this category. But then also, I feel a bit. The last Kiwis campaign was a little bit disappointing. Their last World Cup, they did lose to Australia. They do have big victories. Like, they put 50 points on Samoa. They've beaten Tonga a few times before losing this year. They do have a couple wins over Australia during the last 5 years. But it's not consistent enough. And there is a lingering disappointment with how the Kiwis perform. So there's no player for the Kiwis who has gone to that level. Because I also feel like Chris Wood, he's driving the All Whites culture. He's got his
absolutely.
He's got his good mate Tommy Smith, but not was the old Tommy Smith with a Y? Was that one? Is that the dude?
That's right.
Tommy
the
Smith
old
with a
onion
Y.
bag.
Yeah.
I wonder if that guy's still alive.
Oh, here's hoping, because he was pretty old back in the day. But this is Tommy Smith with an Oi, not a Y. So Chris Wood and Tommy Smith, like, they're good mates, but Chris Wood's, to me, he's driving the culture. Like, Darren Bazley's the coach, but it's Chris Wood who is driving the All Whites culture. And sure, the All Whites aren't winning championships, they're not winning World Cups, but in the context of football, Chris Wood is elevating the All Whites, and he is also dominating the highest level of football, club football. Even women's rugby league, Kiwi Ferns, they're always a little bit disappointing. They do have wins over Australia, but they don't win the World Cups, and they did lose to Australia last year. So there's no one in rugby league. Like, the only person in rugby league who I genuinely feel like is challenging this space is James Fisher-Harris. And I actually think Amelia Kerr, I'd be lenient towards Chris Wood and putting him into this leadership space, but I don't think he's the captain of Nottingham Forest, right?
No, but he has worn the armband when others have been subbed off, sort of thing. Like, there was a game recently where he was wearing the armband for the end of the game, but no, he's not their full-time captain.
So I genuinely feel like the only Kiwi athlete, well, not the only, but like, we're talking our big four. You got Olympians like Lisa Carrington. I talked about Lydia Coate, one of the greatest Olympians we have ever had, and one of the greatest Olympians to ever exist, because she's the only golfer to win 3 Olympic medals, let alone the trifecta, the holy trinity of those medals. So respect to those kind of athletes that we're dealing with as well. But the Amelia Kerr mana is equal to the mana of James Fisher-Harris. They're also winning a lot of championships. Amelia Kerr has won 6 out of the 8 last Super Smash championships. James Fisher-Harris has won 4 consecutive NRL Grand Finals. The difference to me is that Amelia Kerr, on any cricket field, she can be, I reckon she is, the best batter, the best bowler, the best fielder, and the best captain. In any game of rugby league, James Fisher-Harris isn't going to be the biggest meter eater. Like, he's not Jason Taumalolo, Adam Whenua-Blake. He's not a Jake Trbojevic tackling. He's not a passer. His passing skill set isn't like Isaiah Yeo. But he does, and he wasn't the captain of the Panthers. So he's not going to be the best captain if he's not the captain of the Panthers. So that's me picking holes in a tippy-top James Fisher-Harris mana type of player. But even then, he doesn't have the skill, the execution, the pizzazz, the just awesomeness of Amelia Kerr. And I would even challenge you, like, Chris Wood doesn't have that. Chris Wood is operating at a very high level. I think he is a respected leader for Nottingham Forest. He drives their culture, he drives the All Whites culture, and he is one of the best, if not the best, goal scorer in the Premier League right now. He's a veteran on a Nottingham Forest team that is overplaying their expectations, but even then, he's not doing the equivalent of what Amelia Kerr is doing.
Yeah, he's not setting up goals. He's not their top passer. He's like you say, he's not their full-time captain or anything like that. Like, yeah, he is. He's excelling as a role player in a way. Like, it's kind of the most important role because he's the guy who's scoring the goals for them. But it is a limited role. Like, it's something we can highlight, but also kind of like it's a celebration. It's not more than a criticism of, like, he knows exactly what his game is and he does that. But no, he's not the all-rounder on a football pitch, certainly not. And you could say similar things like, I mean, because I think Lydia Ko is probably in the Fisher-Harris second tier, looking up, maybe not consistent enough across all tournaments. You know more about that than I would, but like Stephen Adams as well is coming off the bench this year, so it's not the same thing. And even then he wouldn't be. He's never been an NBA All-Star. He's again like the best possible version of a role player, and at an NBL level, like Shea Ilii, same thing. He's best defender in the NBL, but he's not the guy who's going to win MVP sort of thing. Whereas, like, Amelia Kerr wins most valuable player for every team and tournament she seems to play at the moment. So, it's not just that she can be that on any given day, it's that she actually is on any given day right now.
It sounds rude, but I would put Fisher-Harris in that excellent role player category as well. And if Chris Wood's in that category, it's no disrespect. Like, you're
with Chris Wood, Stephen Adams, maybe Lydia Ko. Like, you're in a good spot there.
The Olympic stuff I do think of a bit differently, and that's why it doesn't make a lot of sense. But I do shun the LPGA stuff for Lydia Ko because I view her as an Olympian. I view Lydia Ko as one of the greatest Olympians for New Zealand, the greatest golfing Olympian ever. So you did mention some basketball players, but is there anyone else that we haven't talked about in this realm? I think we're in agreement that Amelia Kerr is at the top of Mount Ruapehu right now. She's in the crater. She's boiling away in those thermal waters of Mount Ruapehu, ready to explode at any point. To be honest, she's already exploded, but she's at the top of the mountain. I think we agree on that. Is there anyone else, like, again, Lisa Carrington, like the Olympic athletes who dominate? Because, like, you can get into the world championships, but they don't have that structure around them where it's like, okay, every year you're playing a Super Smash, every year you're playing NRL, every year you're playing Premier League, and then you do these other things on top of it. The Olympic stuff is just like, okay, you need to show up every 4 years and dominate every 4 years, which I do feel like Lisa Carrington has done and may continue to do. So I think she is. It's only my ignorance that doesn't put her at the Amelia Kerr tier because I don't know enough. Is there, like, obviously rugby union? I don't know if there's exactly a rugby union player right now, but obviously you're talking about your Richie McCaws, your Dan Carters, those type of characters, your Kieran Reeds as well. Who am I missing? You're deep in the kind of niche sports of the Olympics and stuff like that. Is there anyone I am missing who is a current athlete right now?
I don't think so. I don't think we could miss anyone who was ticking all of the boxes there that we're talking about. I think it either springs to mind straight away or they're just not in the absolute top tier, top of the mountain stuff. I mean, it's like you can make arguments for a few other Olympians as well in the sort of on their way up the mountain or whatever. But like you said, there's arguments there about like it's hard to structure and frame those things in comparison. And then also maybe you're getting into a few more like niche sports as well, where it's not that it's easier to dominate. It's just maybe that it's not as there's it's not the same spotlight. It's not the same pressure. There is still those things, but I mean, I I don't think there could be anyone else. I think it's one of those things where if someone's at that level, you know about it. If they're not, they might still be absolutely incredibly successful. But what we're talking about is like someone who's dominating in every facet, and that's that's supposed to be rare, right? Like that's not supposed to be something that a bunch of people are able to do at once. It's supposed to be something that's completely unique and maybe even generational.
Sounds like Shea Ilii might be doing some crazy stuff in the NBL. So let's update the NBL. And of course, we got women's NBL as well. So we got a couple of Kiwis that you highlighted in our newsletter yesterday who are playing in the women's NBL after playing in Tauihi. So what's just roll through some of the women's NBL players from Aotearoa who are doing stuff in Australia?
Yeah, whip up the list so I've got the things in front of me. So they changed the Tauihi this year, right? To kind of they moved the schedule of it so that it was later in the year, which happened to mean that instead of players being able to play that and then go to play Australia and WNBL, it clashed with a big chunk of the season. So a lot of them, like, so you sort of had like, Ezra McGoldrick's a good example of someone who was playing as a bit of a fringe player in the WNBL last year, but was, getting minutes in most games while she was playing there, and certainly used that to advance her career. A much improved player between last year and this one, but she's a key player for mainland Pokai, so she went back and played for them instead. Didn't go back to play WNBL. Like, she had to make a choice, and she went and played Tauihi. There were a couple who didn't. Tara Reid is the main one who's left it was the Melbourne Boomers, and then they got moved to Geelong. Became the Geelong Boomers, but she left at that time, signed with the Southside Flyers. So she's been playing there. She's been a regular, shooting 42.4% from three-pointers just quietly, which is a big deal because we know that whenever the Tall Ferns have had these big tournaments lately, Asia Cups and Olympic qualifying, they've not just been average at three-pointers, they've been terrible at three-pointers. So to see Tara Reid having a second year in a row shooting big threes, that's a big deal. You want a button there?
Things have got a whole lot better because we do have the one and only Tyler Bindon officially announced with Nottingham Forest a deal until the summer of 2028 and will return to the Royals, which I think is Reading, on loan until the end of this season. He's got a photo at Nottingham Forest. It's all official. So that's all happening. I don't know if I can swing you back to the NBL stuff. We might just finish this NBL segment. You can simmer down, get a cold towel on you, and just relax a little bit. But yes, we do have women's NBL basketball that we're rolling through.
Yeah, so yeah, we'll come back to Tyler Bindon. Tara Reid's staying there. She's doing good things. Also, Ella Tofiano, who is playing for the UC Capitals. She's an Australian-based player anyway, so she was living there, dual national, committed and debuted for the Football Ferns last year. So she's playing as well. She was a development player. She's moved up to, I think, to a full-time contract this year. So that's nice. She's getting a few minutes there, around about 10 minutes or so per game. And then since Tauihi finished, Talia Tupaya, also a dual national, grew up largely in Australia, but has been playing Tauihi pretty regularly, playing for Football Ferns whenever she's been available for the last couple of years. She's popped over since Tauihi to go play for Sydney Flames, as has McKenna Dale as well, who's played about 5 games. Hasn't done a lot yet, sort of limited minutes, but in fact, it looks like I forgot to put the minutes thing onto the thing. Whoops. In the newsletter there. So McKenna Dale and Talia Tupaya both popping up at the same team after finishing up with some Tauihi work. I think the Sydney Flames are the only ones that are sort of pushing, might make playoffs. Southside Flyers, unfortunately, have been kind of bad, and UC Capital don't look like they're going to make it either. Actually, none of those 3 teams have winning records as it stands, probably sort of 2/3 of the way through the season. So I wasn't planning on putting much focus on the WNBL at all, or even much attention towards it because of that clash with the Tauihi. But it is nice to see that there are a few players who have been able to do both still, which is good stuff. Like, you know, the more you're playing professionally, the better you're going to be.
Shout out to the Southside Flyers. I am partial to a bit of Southside flying action, so big up to them. And quickly roll through the men's NBL. We've mentioned Shea Ilii. Melbourne United are currently second. Illawarra seem to have a game in hand, and they're playing the last place Cairns Taipans, who are worse than the New Zealand Breakers. So Illawarra should win that and stay at the top of the table. Melbourne United are second with a big Kiwi crew. Perth are third with a decent Kiwi crew. And then we've got Southeast Melbourne, Sydney, and Adelaide locked in as play-in tournament teams.
Yeah, the Breakers could do a little bit of a favor here to the other Kiwis, which is not something they often do, is do favors for Kiwi basketball. But if they were to beat the Illawarra Hawks in their last game, which I think is on Wednesday night, Breakers are finishing 9th regardless. Nothing's changing there. They're not going to finish 10th. They won't get the wooden spoon thanks to that good start, but they also aren't going to catch Brisbane. So they're finishing 9th. But they could beat Illawarra, and that could give Melbourne an opportunity, who have the same amount of wins but have played 1 less game than Illawarra. Could give them an opportunity to pop up and finish first. I think Melbourne can't finish any lower than 3rd, I think it is. But yeah, should be a good last week of NBL action there. Shea Ilii did have a big game on the weekend. I might just whip up and see if I can find the old statisticos, because 94-92 win over Tasmania. The big play was a steal in the last minute where he just like hounds a dude at half court and rips the ball away and basically swings the game back in his favor. But he had 18 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 steals. So outstanding Shea Ilii stuff. Hit 2 3-pointers as well. Like, that's just kind of the perfect Shea Ilii game, imposing on both ends and doing great stuff. Rob Lowe played 20 minutes there with 12 rebounds. 12 points, 3 rebounds, and 5 assists, which is a big deal there. Him chipping in a few different ways. We are seeing a lot less Flynn Cameron at the moment as they tighten their roster leading into the playoffs, but that's probably to be expected. It'll take an injury to one of the guards for him to pop up in a big role in the most important games. But it looks like Rob Lowe will still hold a pretty solid spot in that rotation when that happens. And Shea Ilii, of course, is just built for those big moments and built for those playoff stuff. But while they're doing that, you mentioned as well that Perth Wildcats also have a decent Kiwi core. They do, but Dante Russo-Nance is a development player, so he's not really going to be playing much in crunch time. And they really just seem to have iced out Hiram Harris lately. I don't even think he played in the game on the weekend, which is weird. Maybe he was injured or something, but even when he plays, he's now in that sort of like less than 10 minutes role, whereas he was for a while there playing 15, kind of 20 minutes. And over the past 2 years, he seems like someone who, when he plays, they do well. So it's a little bit annoying to see him dropping down a little bit, but that is at least balanced out by the fact that Ty Webster is back from injury now. So he hadn't played since before Christmas, I think, something like that. He'd missed about 6 weeks or so of action, but he's back. He's back and having a pretty solid impact. Is probably playing off the bench for the Wildcats. I don't know if that's just a bringing him back from injury issue, or if it's maybe the role they want him to play in the playoffs is to be that sixth man, the guy who comes on and leads the second unit and whatever when maybe Bryce Cotton or whoever is resting, which is frankly a pretty handy role for Ty Webster because he gets to be a big ball handler in that situation. He gets to kind of orchestrate stuff and be a dribbler and a passer and all that. Well, that Ty Webster kind of game that we're used to. So lovely to see him back. Lovely to see him back just in time for the big stuff as well. And those are the two teams really to follow as we head on towards the finals. We talked a little bit about all this last week, but yeah, Isaiah Liafa will get his spots at Sydney, Southeast Melbourne, get a little bit of Tom Vodanovic, probably 10 minutes per game kind of thing. And either Adelaide or Tasmania, whoever finishes in that sixth spot as well and gets the last bit of play-in action. Adelaide do have Keanu Rasmussen, who's a dual national, been playing New Zealand NBL for Hawke's Bay last year, in Tasmania. Got a bit of Walter Brown as a DP on the bench, but a lot of Ruben Tarangi as well, playing as a starter and one of their key dudes, despite not putting up big box score type stuff, but that's what we expect from Ruben Tarangi, as a dude who influences the game in subtler ways.
Righto, we do have news that Tyler Bindon will soon be joining Chris Wood at Nottingham Forest. Not quite right now, but I can feel your energy. I can feel the mana waves just pouring out of you towards Nottingham and Nottingham Forest, the Wood in Nottingham. Empty the tank. Just give me all you got about Tyler Bindon joining the Nottingham Forest, but I also know you're locked and loaded with Chris Wood stats because he scored a hat-trick in a big win for Nottingham Forest, I think, over Brighton Hove Albion. And I will say, I will add my 2 cents, my couple of 5 whacks. 2 of Chris Wood's goals, I think one was a header, one was a bit of a foot action. The third was a penalty. But the 2 goals that came in from crosses came exactly how I have noted with Chris Wood. Because I think it's the dude beside him there, is that Ulanga?
Anthony Ulanga, yeah, set up both the goals you're talking about.
Exactly, and where did his crosses go?
One was chipped to the back post and one was laid through sort of 6-yard box, more or less in the middle, I think he was.
Both of them went between the defensive line and the goal. And that is exactly what Chris Wood told me when he was doing his masterclass. He said, I've got the connection with my teammates that if I'm just hanging on the defensive line, you just put that ball between the defense and the goal, and I will always get there. That is the connection that Chris Wood shares with his comrades at Nottingham Forest. And I was watching those goals and I was like, well, both of those crosses, like Chris Wood isn't bursting into that space. He's just hanging on the defensive line, and those crosses come exactly where those crosses are put exactly where Ulanga and any of his teammates know that Chris Wood's going to get there first, and those crosses are put into spaces where Chris Wood knows that's where the cross is going. So it's a key detail for me when I'm watching Chris Wood, and I hope to see this expand out to the All Whites, where people just know, put the ball between the defense and the goal, and Chris Wood would always get there, no matter how he is positioned before the cross comes in. Because he can predict, he knows where the cross is coming, so he's always going to get there. But it's like he always starts just on the shoulder of the defender. It doesn't look like he's going to burst forward into the space. He's always just lingering, but he knows exactly where the cross is going to come. 2 of those goals came from those crosses, and that is my expertise on Chris Wood and Nottingham Forest. Your turn.
Well, that point there is, I think, the biggest thing in favour of Francis de Vries getting a lot more always opportunity, not necessarily as a starter, but also possibly as a starter. Because like head to head, there's just no way you would pick him ahead of Liberato Cacace. He was just a much better player. I don't really care how well you play in the A-League. If there's a guy playing regular Serie A minutes, that's better. But Cacace is increasingly quite a versatile player, and he can, I have no doubt if he can play as a left winger in Serie A, he can play as a left winger for the All Whites, particularly at a time when, the next window it's touch and go whether Ben Old will be fit in time for that one. And there is a possibility there. And then maybe you get Francis de Vries in there as the left back and as a set piece taker, specifically because his crossing is so good. Like the stuff he's doing for Auckland FC now, it's such a weird one because I watched him a lot when he was playing for Eastern Suburbs, and it felt like he was always capable of hitting that one perfect cross, but it would be like one was amazing and three were terrible. And admittedly, he was coming back from an ACL injury at that point. Like, his fitness wasn't where it wanted to be, and he was probably at a bit of a crossroads in his career as well, which would have affected him maybe mentally too, having lost out on his gig in Sweden and having to rebuild his career back in semi-pro / amateur stuff in New Zealand. So admittedly, we're never going to get the best of him at that level, but the consistency that he's showing now is incredible for Auckland, just specifically with those crosses, how every cross looks like it's going into a dangerous area that challenges the defenders, challenges the goalkeeper, and is in a spot where the attackers want it to be. Well, Chris Wood's going to feast upon that if you have, even if it's just like chuck on Franny de Vries for 15 minutes at the end of a game when you're chasing a goal and you have him taking the corners and you have him whipping in deep crosses. Like, Chris Wood's going to love that too. Like, just to have that as an option, I think, is the biggest thing in his favor for getting more opportunities. Because even then, like I said, Cacace is a better player, but I think Dalton Wilkins is probably a better player as well. We just haven't seen a lot of him yet for the All Whites. And you've also got guys like James McGarry and Sam Sutton hanging around. Like, there's good left backs there in competition, but De Vries has at least that one special thing that might line up very well with the team's best player. And yeah, Chris Wood's got a combination with Anthony Alanga that's kind of crazy because that's the fourth goal he's set up for Wood this year, and he did 6 of them last year. So since the start of last season, no combination of assist to goal scorer has had more goals than the 10 that those two have combined for, which is pretty incredible. And that's perfect Chris Wood stuff as well, because he always says every single interview they ask him about this stuff, and he's just like, yeah, well, I couldn't do it without the service I get from my teammates. They put it on a plate, and it's just my job to go and gobble up that meal that they serve to me. And every time he scores goals, it's the same. Like they've just got I'd say telepathic, but it's not that. It's just that they've played it together enough now. He's as embedded with these players that it doesn't have to be telepathic. They just know. Like it's not trying to figure anything out. They just know the answer to these things. This is where Chris Wood likes to be. This is where I'm going to put the ball, and he's going to do the rest.
Yeah, it can't be telepathic if they probably just said it to each other.
Yeah,
like Chris Wood just.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be telepathic.
Chris Wood said, "You put the ball between the defense and the goal. Yeah. I'll get it." And so yeah, it's just communication. That's just talking. That's just friendship. That is chemistry with your teammates, not necessarily psychic powers.
No, it doesn't need psychic powers because it's actually a simple thing. It's one of those Conan Doyle ones, or it's an obvious thing that people maybe overlook. It's just like, well, what if you just keep crossing? What if you ask the striker where he wants the ball, practice it heaps in training and during games, and you keep putting the ball there, and he keeps getting there, and he keeps scoring goals? It's maybe not a coincidence, but yeah, that was his third Premier League hat-trick in his career, which makes him the 43rd player in history to have scored 3 separate Premier League hat-tricks. He got one for Burnley against Wolves, which is funny because the manager of that Wolves team was Nuno Espirito Santo, who's now his manager at Nottingham Forest. So he scored a hat-trick against the manager, who then got the best out of him a few years later when they combined. He also got one against Newcastle with Forest after leaving Newcastle. 6 months later, he scored a hat-trick on Boxing Day against Newcastle, against his old team. And then, of course, Brighton is one of his old teams as well. Not quite in the same way, because Brighton was sort of a team that he was at, I think, on loan earlier on in his career, he spent a little bit of time there, not a lot, and it was lower down in the league, so it's not really quite the revenge tour that it might have been for him trying to show Newcastle United what they missed out on. But yeah, third Premier League hat-trick, and probably, I think, the perfect Chris Wood hat-trick as well, because one was a header, one was a tap-in, one was a penalty. Like the three things that he excels the most at. No player has scored more headers this season, by the way, than Chris Wood. He's got 6 headed goals this year. I think Haaland and Isak are on 4 each, so it's not even that close. He's got a spare. You know, there's some daylight between him and second place. Just incredible stuff from Chris Wood, who continues to convert chances at just a really efficient rate. I think he's got, what is he up to now? 17 goals. So the most he scored in a Premier League season. His previous record was 14. He had tied that before this game. He did it also last season. He did it also with Burnley in 2019-20. He's now got 17 goals this season. He's third on the Golden Boot ranks. I think the postman must be here because the dog's gone nuts in the background. Either that or the dog just found out about the Tyler Bindon transfer. Because all the stuff with Chris Wood, I feel like I'm just updating the stats each time. Like, guess what? He's taken another penalty and he scored another penalty. He still hasn't missed a penalty in any form since April 2016. Like, we're nearing 9 years since he last missed a professional play. Like, that's the bulk of his peak of his career right there. And he's perfect from the spot. He's never missed a penalty. I think he's 8 out of 8 in the Premier League from the penalty spot. Just amazing stuff. He's never missed a penalty for the All Whites either. Just throw that one out there too. But I feel like I'm updating these stats each time. Like, he just keeps adding to them. It's not necessarily that he's doing new stuff, but I don't know. He signed a contract recently with Nottingham Forest, right? Signed a 2-year extension. They only wanted to give him a 1-year extension. They were doing this annoying thing where it's like, oh, well, he's in his 30s now. I don't know if he can sustain this. So I don't think it's necessarily about like, we don't want him on the books for 2 years. I think it was more like, if we give him a 1-year contract now when he's at his peak, we'll pay him for what he's doing this season. Like, we got to pay him what he's worth, what the negotiating says. But he's probably not going to be this good next season. So if we sign the second year of that contract next season, we can probably negotiate him down in his salary a little bit. Rather than if we pay it now, we're paying him for 2 years based on his peak performances. I think that's more the thought process there. It's not that they didn't want him for 2 years. It's that they thought they could save some money if they split that contract in two. But he just kept scoring goals. So at some point, you just have to say, well, I guess we just have to give you what you want. And so they've given him what they want. And then suspiciously, 2 weeks later, one of his international teammates gets signed. And last year, they signed Marko Stamenic as well. I think there is some element of like, they're obviously, the Nottingham Forest scouts will be watching the All Whites games. They want to see what one of their key players is doing. They'll be watching all the international games that their players are involved in. And so you're going to see guys like Tyler Bindon and Marko Stamenic. You're going to notice that. I don't know if it's a bit of a romantic notion, but I also like to think that maybe Chris Wood is putting in a good word for some of his international buds as well, you know, and saying, like, this Tyler Bindon kid, I've trained with him a lot. Like, I've gone head to head with him in All Whites trainings, and he's the real deal. This Marko Stamenic lad, like, he's the real deal. We know, like, I can tell you guys, you could see how good he is in some of these games. I'm telling you, he's better than that in training. I like to think that Chris Wood is doing a little bit of that. I'm speculating here, but maybe he even put it in his contract and you give me a +1 for the contract. I want this Tyler. I'll sign the deal and make sure you bring in Tyler Bindon as well in January. I don't know, but it's a nice little conglomeration where this has happened. I will say also there's another element to this, which is that it's a fellow called Nelson Abbey who used to play. I think this is who it was. He used to play for Reading, who was a centre back guy that Bindon rotated with a little bit first half of last season. Abbey left not to Nottingham Forest but to Olympiacos in the transfer window around this time a year ago. So Olympiacos is owned. That's where Marko Stamenic is on loan. It's owned by the same guy who owns Nottingham Forest. So he didn't go to Nottingham Forest, but he did go within their sort of like, you know, club structure within the umbrella. And it was when Nelson Abbey left that Tyler Bindon then had to step up and be the full-time centre-back. Like, you're starting every single game now. And it was at that point that he went to a new level and has been pretty amazing for them ever since. because of a move from one of their dudes leaving to go to Olympiacos. And so you know already that if that's happening, that they've probably got shared scouts between Forest and Olympiacos. You know they're already looking at Reading because they've signed a player from there before. And then you see in the guy who steps up to replace the guy that you signed, who, by the way, hasn't really done anything. I don't think he's even I think they loaned him off to Swansea and he didn't do very well. So he got brought back to Olympiacos, and I think they're going to loan him out somewhere else, and maybe they already have. So we'll see what it turns out to be for Bindon, because obviously we want to see the Bindon Stamanic Wood spine in a Premier League game. That'd be incredible. Chris Wood's going to be there, but Marko Stamanic is out on loan playing off the bench as like the fourth choice midfielder at Olympiacos at the moment. So it's not necessarily a guarantee he goes from there straight back to Forest. There's things about fit and whatever where, and he'll get a preseason to nail things down. And he's still doing all right there in Olympiacos. He's not playing badly when he plays. He's just a little bit down the charts there. And Bindon's going to be loaned back to Reading for the rest of this season, and who knows where he will be next year, whether he hangs around the fringes of the Premier League squad, or if they want to send him on loan to a championship team, or maybe even Reading can manage with Bindon sticking around. Maybe they can manage to get promoted back to the championship themselves, and he has another year at Reading on it. Who knows? Like, he's secured in the long term, but that doesn't necessarily mean he goes straight into the Nottingham Forest team or anything like that. We'll see what kind of plans they got for him, because we're seeing the same thing already with Alex Paulson as well, haven't we? Where, signed to a Premier League team, but then loaned out, and Stamanic signed to Forest, but then loaned out, albeit loaned out within that umbrella again. So don't know exactly how that's going to go, but there's a few different connections there with how that's gone down. And the one I like the most is the whether it's true or not, at least the image I have in my head of Chris Wood sitting at the bargaining table negotiating his new contract and being like, I'll sign on your terms, but you bring me in that Tyler Bindon as well, and you give Marko Stamanic a preseason next season. When we get back after he finishes his loan, we'll get this All Whites reunion going. White. I mean, Matt Garbutt's available. Maybe we'll get that one done before the deadline closes today as well. Put in a bid for Libby Kikachu while you're at it. Why not? Get them all together.
I don't think it happened at the bargaining table, but I can see how the connections were used. Like, I think it's completely logical to suggest that, because obviously, like, the world of football is so big, and there's so many footballers that, yes, Tyler Bindon's a good young centre-back, but there's good young centre-backs around the whole world, right? You can get value from many different countries. But once you've got, then comes into the ownership group stuff. Like, obviously there's connections there, but there's also a trusted leader in your club. All he needs to do, like all Chris Wood needs to say is, hey, go have a look at Tyler Bindon. You've already scouted Reading, as you laid out with the other centre-back.
And probably the All Whites too, so yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, you can say, put a spotlight on Tyler Bindon because you're already watching the games, because you're already invested in scouting these games, and then you're getting into a better space where you're not just like, because obviously this doesn't happen, but it would be a bit weird to just sign players because Chris Wood said so. But it replaced Chris.
You say it doesn't happen, but like Bronny James is out there, so
yeah. But that's America. That's basketball.
That is America.
Football. I'm talking England Premier League football, and there is very few footballers in the Premier League who any club will say, "Yeah, we're going to sign this player because you said so." They might take on the advice, but they've all got the deep scouting networks. They've all got the connections around the world. So, yeah, I think there's a little bump. There's a little Chris Wood bump. Like, he is saying he is a trusted leader at Nottingham Forest, and if like Nottingham Forest have a need, they have a gap in their roster, they're going to test out those connections, but also you got to pass the scouting test. And one, based on what we know about Marko Stamanic, based on what I think Marko Stamanic was probably before Chris Wood had a bit of mana built up with Nottingham Forest, but you still need to be good at football. You still need to be doing good stuff. And Marko Stamanic, Tyler Bindon, excellent footballers on the rise in two positions where you can see them adding value to Nottingham Forest. We've also got a Football Ferns squad.
We do.
So the Football Ferns squad, they are playing 2 games in Costa Rica. It's still a little bit goofy that Michael Main is the interim coach, even though we've got assistant coaches sorted. He's basically choosing the squad. So it seemed like it would be a little bit ridiculous if he's not going to be the full-time coach, given everything that's happened. So
my impressions as well, especially because the same thing happened in parallel with Darren Paisley. Like, he was sitting as assistants, he was picking squads, he had multiple tours to do things, and then they just ended up hiring him full-time. Feels like we're on exactly the same course with Michael Main.
And that feels a lot like the New Zealand cricket coaching positions and vacancies. If you promote from within, it's going to be a little bit cheaper. And of course, New Zealand cricket, New Zealand football, they don't have like money to blow on Jose Mourinho or even Brendan McCullum. Like, Brendan McCullum's making a lot more money coaching England than he would coaching New Zealand, let alone any Stephen Fleming, Daniel Vittori, who have jobs around the world as well. So there's a little bit of saving money, but also these dudes have intricate knowledge of the pathways. So Darren Paisley worked his way up through the New Zealand football pathway. Michael Main's worked up through the New Zealand football pathway. I think we're getting to that stage. Like, I believe the next Black Caps coach after Gary Stead will be promoted from within. I think that's the way New Zealand cricket's heading as well, where they promote players with intricate knowledge of a very strong pathway development system, just working their way to the top. So I think me and you, we are operating under the assumption that Michael Main will be the long-term, unless he sucks, Football Ferns coach. To me, that frames the squad he has selected for this little series. Because there are players who are missing. You've listed some notables as CJ Bock, Katie Bowen, and Rebecca Stott, all very highly respected Football Ferns, who probably already have a relationship with Michael Main. Michael Main probably already knows what they're up to around the world, knows their workloads, knows their status, knows what they're up to, knows what they can add to the Football Ferns. So maybe, okay, now's not the best time for you to come into a Football Ferns squad, but you got to fly across the whole, you got to fly across the world just to play some football games. As well as we've got some younger players, again, who Michael Main has relationships with, to get them an opportunity. And you'll know better than me, but the current Football Ferns squad, and so not the current squad for this Costa Rica series, but the mixer, the Football Ferns mixer, this must be the deepest mixer we've had. This is an industrial mixer. This is not your kitchen mixer, where you're licking the icing off the little fork thingies, brewing your cake. No, the Football Ferns mixer, similar with every other sport we talk about, this is an industrial baking mixer. It's big. And you've got players who have missed out on selection, but are probably in your top tier squad. You've got youngsters who are now getting an opportunity. You've got Maya Hahn coming back from the Germany mixer. Now she's back in the Aotearoa mixer. The Germany mixer is probably built better, given what we know about the Germans.
It's also more full, though.
It's also more full. It's more industrial, more efficient, yes, and more effective at baking good goods. Shout out to all the bakers getting baked. So this squad especially tells me, and you've been on this point, you've been like the number of players playing professionally around the world, getting good opportunities, playing for the Football Ferns, making their debuts, the turnover of Football Ferns players we've had over the last 3 to 4 years. I reckon we're approaching a pretty cool era for the Football Ferns where they have a lot of players in the mix. And to be honest, the football especially, the more players you can have with a little bit of international experience, who have been in the setup, who have been around the team, they know the culture of representing Aotearoa specifically in football. I don't think we've had big footballing culture elements prior to the last 5 years. Like, it just seems like these teams get together, play some games, they might win a few games, and then they go, somehow they get to a World Cup, and then they just, go their separate ways. Now it feels like there's a genuine Kiwi footballing culture that has been bolstered by the grassroots and going to the top tier. But the Football Ferns and the All Whites, but we're talking about the Football Ferns here. Players are going to be injured playing club football. Players are going to be unavailable because their clubs won't let them play because the travel restrictions, whatever it might be. Players are going to be out of form because they're not starting for their club teams. Like, what's the squad total? How many players selected?
23.
23 selected in this Football Ferns squad. I'm talking about 30 players in the Black Caps, 35 players in the Black Caps wider squad. I'm talking about top 50 for the New Zealand Warriors, which means the Kiwis need to have 40 players. The Football Ferns, we got 23 players in this squad. The Football Ferns need to have 40 players competing for selection for the Football Ferns to get better, perform better, and win games of football around the world and in major tournaments. So I think we're just taking a step towards that level of depth. Now, talked a lot about football there. So your turn to talk Football Ferns, but specifically the squad depth that they are building. Even if Michael Main's just the interim coach and he's building the squad depth for someone else. Maybe Jenny Bindon.
Yeah, maybe she's the one who's auditioning. It's been a good week for the Bindon family because Jenny's now the assistant coach with she's got Michael Main's old job now that Michael Main is doing Jika Klimkova's old job. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Sam Wilkinson as well added to the crew. Plus they've got an Englishman to be their goalkeeping coach. So it's a pretty handy staff. And it's a completely different staff than what they had before. Whereas when Main went to the Olympics, he more or less just kept the other coaches that Klimkova had around. One of which being himself. He was one of them. He stepped up. They did bring in Natalie Lawrence, former Phoenix coach, to be the extra assistant to take over his old role while he was doing the other one. But none of those coaches from the Olympics, from like the coaching stuff, I don't know what medical and support staff, whatever, I'm sure there's crossover there, but specifically the assistants and the goalkeeping coach, like those are all changed now. And yes, I find it hard to view that as something that you do for an interim coach who might only have one more tour in charge. That seems like something you do when you're planning longer term. And reiterate it, this is what Darren Baisley did as well. Like even to the parallel of Simon Elliott and Jenny Bindon, I think there's a lot in common there, where you get someone who was a legend for the team as well, can relate to the players on that level, but also has big coaching experience. Bindon's done a lot of stuff in sort of USA college level. She's been coaching more recently in England, a little bit with London City Lionesses, actually most recently with Reading, which is funny because Tyler Bindon signed with Reading because like he was in the LAFC academy and he was playing America, like USA under 18s or under 19s or something at that time. They moved to England because Jenny got a job coaching as the goalkeeper coach for London City Lionesses, which didn't last because then they got a big they got bought out by a billionaire, and now that team is completely different. But except for Grace Neville was still hanging around there. But that's why he moved to London, why their family moved to London, and he trialed with Reading because it was just a local club that would have him. He ended up signing there, and now they've made him a bunch of money, and he's been excellent. So, and then after that coincidental thing, I would imagine in the same way that Chris Wood's presence helps Tyler Bindon get a gig at Nottingham Forest, I'm guessing Tyler Bindon's presence helps Jenny Bindon get a gig with Reading's women's team as well. So as their goalkeeping coach. But that's no longer because she's now the Football Ferns main assistant, which, it's again, like deep parallel with how Simon Elliott was brought in for the All Whites as well, which I think for the most part has gone really well. So I think that's definitely a pattern that you want to follow. I was talking about like the football. I remember writing pre-Olympics how the depth of the squad, the growing depth, the burgeoning depth, the expanding depth was a focus then. I think it's even more so now because Michael Main has told us that it is. And you said 40, that was a good number because that's also the number that he's been saying in interviews is he has around about 40 players that he's in contact with and that he's tracking closely. And obviously there are more. There are youth team players. There are a few younger ones who are maybe a little bit deeper in the mix, not really contending for Football Ferns squads just yet, but will be at some point. Or there's maybe some older players, some capped players who have dipped out of the mix, potentially a few of the higher performing National League players as well might be in there, and you can take that well beyond 50 if you wanted. I don't think there's ever been a time in New Zealand women's football when we've had 50 plus players who could conceivably do a job at international level. I think that's a complete rarity, even at a time where it feels like there has been quite a lot of turnover, where there's quite a lot of the senior players haven't they've had a lot of retirements in the last year, and then also before that, and this end of the after every World Cup cycle, I guess you get a bunch of retirements, and this is the start of a new World Cup cycle, and for that reason, these games against Costa Rica are probably the least consequential ones they will play in that World Cup cycle. So it is the ones that make the most sense if you're going to do some rotating, if you're going to have a look at some of your depth options. And it's not just about like getting them into training, it's about putting them on the pitch and playing games, because it's one thing to say we think I don't know, Liz Anton is good enough to be pushing, competing with Michaela Moore or Claudia Bunge or whatever to be a centre back in this team. But if Katie Bowen and Rebecca Stott are starting every game at centre back, you're not really getting an opportunity to see that in action, right? You've got the trainings, you've got your whatever they're doing at their clubs, but you want to give them international games and extended international games to prove it. That feels like what this tour is about, where you do have 5 uncapped players. You got Mania Elliott in there, you got Maya Hahn, you got Emma Peinenberg, you got Kelly Brown, who I thought was injured, but apparently not. I guess there's a couple of weeks before the thing as well, so she might well return for Perth before then, which would be good, because she was going very well for Perth. It's a little bit surprised that she's been picked ahead of someone like Maggie Jenkins, but I think maybe that's more they want Kelly Brown in there because she's a number 9, not a winger, like not a utility forward. They want specifically someone who can be a striker and score some goals, and Kelly Brown does have 3 A-League goals already to her name this season, and has scored copious amounts in the level below the A-League over the last couple of years. And who was the other uncapped player? There was someone else, Geo Candy as well, who played 1 game for the Wellington Phoenix a couple of years ago as a backup goalkeeper, has been the backup for Melbourne Victory recently, training the house down apparently, but hasn't actually got a game, which would be nice if they would actually let her play at some point. But the goalkeeping depth is a little bit of a weird one because Anna Leit's not available because she's been injured, and she doesn't have a club. Well, if you're injured and don't have a club, and you haven't played a game for 6 months, you really shouldn't be making national teams, no matter how good you are. So fair enough, like give her some space and let that happen naturally. But yeah, beyond Vic Essen and then maybe a little bit of Brie Edwards, there's great goalkeeping depth, but it's not great goalkeeping like starting depth. It's prospect depth. It's Amy Daniele. It's maybe even Brooke Neary as well, getting on the bench when Daniele's been injured for the Phoenix. It's Murphy Sheaf, who's playing university stuff, who went to the Olympics as the 3rd choice. It's I thought Una Foyle would have had a good chance. Who's been playing professionally in Ireland, long-time goalkeeper for Canterbury United in the National League. So there's depth there, as well as Geo Candy. There's depth there, but it's not necessarily proven depth. So I think that's a little bit of they've had to stretch a little bit to fill out the goalkeeping things with that elite there. But I mean, most of the squad just looks like what most of the squad has looked like for a while. You're just missing a few of the key players, and it's a lot of the starting 11 players, and that does feel deliberate. I mean, Leit's injured, Steinmetz is injured. We've talked about the 3 defenders who aren't there. Ellie Riley's injured, and maybe don't know if she'll get back at any point. Like that might be a career-ending injury. We don't quite know yet. There goes your entire starting 4 and your number 1 goalkeeper. So it's definitely going to be playing opportunities for everyone else. That seems to make a lot of sense. The only thing about it is that Michael Main's been asked a few times, and he doesn't seem to be able to give a straight answer to the question of like, are you just rotating these players or are they dropped? He seems to talk around it, and that's really weird. Like, that seems like it seems strange, but also at the same time, I'm thinking, well, if you did make a bold decision to drop them and you just don't want to admit it, that doesn't make sense either. Like, it seems like if you made a bold decision like that, you'd want to own that decision. That seems like something you do with a sort of forceful personality. So that angle doesn't make a lot of sense either. So I am pondering the idea with my tinfoil hat on over whether maybe there's a little bit of Yukikonkova player mutiny kind of fallout stuff going on there with three of their senior players maybe being told, like, officially we're just resting you, and that is the purpose of the thing. We want to test the depth. We want to give them an opportunity to actually play some games, not just be in squad, but play some games. Then also maybe if there might be a sort of unofficial being like, let us show you who's boss coming down from the national body, not from Michael Main, which would be why he's sort of talking around it and sounding a little bit uncomfortable answering that question. Might be something like that. Might be a little bit too conspiratorial, but New Zealand football did get made to look pretty stupid over that situation, when also the investigation did actually say like there wasn't a legal wrongdoing or breach of contract or anything like that. Like, it did clear Kimkova and they still came out looking bad. So maybe there might be a little bit of a slap of the wrist or something involved there. I'm not sure, but it also kind of doesn't matter as long as we're in a situation where the next squad is named and CJ Bott's there and Katie Bowen's there and Rebecca Stott's there, then sweet ass. Like, we all move on. It's a new era. It's a new coaching regime, and they are three of our best players. That's all it needs to be. You know, if there needed to be a point made, okay, the point's been made and we move forward. If not, then it doesn't matter. They're just having a rest, and we're having a look at some of these other options and seeing who else can be centre backs in case one of them gets injured for a major tournament, which, you know, does happen. You do get a lot of injuries in football, so you got to have that. You got to have that backup. It's an interesting squad for a few of these reasons. We'll see what they look like against Costa Rica, but we are likely to see a team there that has Macy Fraser, Maya Hahn, Millie Clegg as key players in a sort of amongst your attack, along with maybe who else might I put in that category? I mean, like Jackie Hand, Indy Riley have kind of already established themselves there, but I think in particular that Fraser, Hahn getting their combination going back again from the under-17 World Cup once upon a time, and then Millie Clegg as well. Like, those are three creative players of a type that we just don't have otherwise. Like, there's a little bit of a rarity there. There's a uniqueness in having three of them at once as well, and being able to have them combining with each other. So I think there's something special there that could be that could be uncovered, as if they're able to, you know, if they can get the tactics right around them, if they get the team right around them, the defensive set, and get them the ball in good positions. I think those three could do something pretty handy and actually give the Ferns a bit of an attacking threat, which they haven't had for quite a while. So there's some pretty exciting potential about the squad, and that to see them together, we've only got maybe a few minutes of Macy Fraser and Millie Clegg on the pitch at the same time for the Football Ferns at the Olympics, and then Fraser got injured and went off. So very, very limited looks at this in the past, and we've never seen Maya Hahn play for the senior national team either. So that, like, the focus is on the selections right now. When the games are actually being played, that's where the focus should be, is looking at those three young attackers and seeing what they can offer and how they can take the team forward, addressing what is our overwhelming biggest weakness, which is the lack of goal threat.
In the A-League, I think we had a loss for the Wellington Phoenix Women, so they've had a couple losses in a row. Auckland FC, another big win at Mount Smart, the Temple of Mount Smart. Auckland FC, top of the table. And Wellington Phoenix Women, they've dipped out of the top six. So we're still hoping the Wellington Phoenix Women can crack finals footy for the first time, but they got to win some games. And they, points-wise, they're 2 points, 3 points out of the top six. They got the same number of wins as a lot of the teams above them, but less draws, more losses. And Auckland FC are sitting pretty comfy at the top of the table. They got the most wins, they got the most points, and as usual, they have the fewest goals conceded. Just quickly, because we talked a lot of football here, and it wasn't the biggest weekend of A-League football, where are you at with the Wellington Phoenix Women? How are you feeling about their finals chances?
Well, I still think their finals chances are pretty significant. They've got 9 games to go. So it's still a fair way. And I think three of their last 4 games are at home. And there's a couple other, 3 of their next 4 games are at home too. Those overlap, those streaks. But it's frustrating because that game where they lost 1-0 to Brisbane Roar was almost identical to the game where they lost 1-0 to Central Coast in the previous round. Like both of them away games, both of them 1-0 score lines, both of them, I think, second half goals. 62nd minute against Brisbane and 54th minute against Central Coast. And most overwhelmingly, both of them were really strong performances that deserved at least a point. I think they played really well in both of those games and came away with nothing because they couldn't score a goal, because they couldn't put the ball in the pesky back of it. They couldn't put the ball in the old onion bag, as Tommy Smith would have said. They just couldn't do it. Like they mustered heaps of chances, good crosses, getting in good situations, overlaps, and pullbacks and all this kind of stuff, like long shots, and they played really well. They defended really well for the most part as well. A little bit frisky at times against Brisbane, but set pieces too. Like they had so many opportunities and they just couldn't score a goal. And it's happened 2 weeks in a row. And because of that, they've lost 2 games where they very easily could have taken something from it. But we know they are a much better team at home and they are much better conversion rate they score a lot more goals at home as well. So they do have a few home games coming up, and they're gonna have to, because they failed to get anything out of this little road stand, they're gonna have to capitalize in those homers. But they're capable of doing that, and they did it last time, that home stretch as well.
And of course, Auckland FC had another victory at home, but this time your mate Moreno was starting, I believe, on the left side of the midfield. What did you make of this Auckland FC win? Was it another typical Auckland FC win? Was there something different that you saw? How did you process this victory? They were playing, I think it was Macarthur FC, because they got that Bratton. Is that his name in the midfield?
Yeah, Luke Bratton. Really thought there were going to be punches thrown at some point there. He was really. It's not just that he was getting niggly. It's like I think Auckland FC kind of started it as well, specifically getting very physical in the midfield, and there was a few
Well,
got the feeling quite a few words were thrown out there, but we didn't quite get fists.
But I think the German, he's another. They were talking up his leadership, but if you're not a McCarthy FC fan, you're just like, this is a niggly bugger. Who cares about his leadership? He's a niggly bugger. But I do believe, because I think McCarthy FC had a win against Wellington Phoenix in Wellington a few weeks ago, like earlier in the season. And just as you mentioned that niggle, it makes a lot of sense that Auckland FC, they are far more capable of dealing with guys like Bratton and a team like McCarthy FC, who are a bit niggly. They will get in the grit and grind with you if you want to do that, play that style of football. Auckland FC, as the best team in the A-League, they not only welcome it, but they can balance that gritty football with winning, razzle-dazzle with clinical defense. And I think that's a major, you've just opened up a notable difference between Auckland FC and Wellington Phoenix, I reckon, because Wellington Phoenix, little bit younger, maybe a bit more fragile, especially without Rufa, less composed, less experienced, whereas Auckland FC, that, as I've said all season long, they're playing big boy footy. They can be robust with a niggly opposition without losing the clinical goal scoring, razzle dazzle, but also shutting down opposition attacks with just well-timed tackles and not losing the plot, as we've seen. Not for Wellington Phoenix, it's losing the plot as in like minor mishaps or becoming big mishaps, not necessarily losing the plot and getting in a scrap. But I do think that Auckland FC showed their class and their composure and how they went to battle with McCarthy FC, but also just won the game playing good footy.
Yeah, I'd even take that slightly further and say that's an inbuilt part of their identity, even is being able to do that, being able to go, head to head, right up to the line. They don't seem to cross it. I don't think we've seen too much petty stuff or, silly fouls. They don't seem to be a team that gets an abundance of yellow cards or anything like that. But they're certainly not afraid of a bit of the scrappy stuff in midfield in particular. And yeah, it's part of how they play, and it's something that's been quite successful for them. And it's also something that's very emblematic of older, more experienced teams of being able to handle that stuff, whereas the younger, less experienced teams tend to, or players rather, tend to maybe take those things a little bit more personally or react emotionally, which I think, yes, is a key difference between the Phoenix at the moment, who have a lot of young players, and Auckland FC, who have a couple of young players, but also have much more experience across the park in all positions. Um, MacArthur did lose to the Phoenix, I think, like 2 or 3 weeks ago in MacArthur. That was the game where Costa Barbarouses scored the winning penalty. It was like they were getting played off the park in the first half, only 1-0 down, bit of a second half comeback, and managed to scrape a much needed 2-1 win on the road. But you are right in that MacArthur did beat Wellington in Wellington earlier on in the season as well. So yeah, there've been some formidable contests between them and each of the New Zealand teams there. So good win from Auckland FC. Moreno did start. He scored a goal after 9 minutes. I kind of don't feel like he really did anything else in that game. So that's in a way, that's kind of just exactly the same as the sub appearances, right? It's like he'll give you 15 minutes of creative excellence and then maybe not as much afterwards. So maybe that is more consistent than it seems, is that he comes on, scores within 10 minutes of stepping on the pitch, and then maybe faded away a little bit after that. But that was an important goal. And even more important was the winning goal in the 80th minute. So not quite at the 80th minute, means like 79 point something. So it wasn't quite within the last 10 minutes of the game, but close enough, right? It's another relatively late goal to decide an outcome in Auckland FC's favor, as they continue to do. And after I wrote a big piece about how all the New Zealand players, basically, like almost literally all of the New Zealand players on this team, are at least matching expectations, but are most of them exceeding expectations and what we thought they would have, like what the general consensus would have been for what they'd be capable of playing A-League football, particularly many of them playing A-League football for the first time. So many of these Kiwis exceeding expectations, wrote a big old thing about it, and then two imports scored the key goals in the subsequent game. But first goal set up by Max Mata, second goal set up by Francis de Vries. So you're still getting that impact there from those fellas doing, very important things. In fact, that almost is a better example of what I was saying, because it's not trying to argue that the Kiwi players are the overwhelming best players on the pitch, just saying that they are giving them so much more value than they maybe had a right to expect. And you're seeing that there in that game, where like they're not the guys scoring the goals, but they're setting up the goals, and that's equally as important, but a lot more subtle, a lot more sort of undercover. But maybe not so much for Francis de Vries, because he's getting a lot of these assists. But that was a big moment as well for Max Mata, being able to, like, little nod back at the far post. Moreno's there to turn it home. De Vries has done this from day one, but Mata's really looked quite comfortable in these starts that he's been getting, and I expect that to continue on, not in the least because of, how well he's playing, sure, but also I think Guillermo Mai has just I think he's been a much more influential player when he's able to play as the second striker with a lot more freedom to roam around and do stuff like that. So there's another example of how a Kiwi player is helping the imports play better themselves as well. So the formula's working for Auckland FC.
I would like to take credit for the Max Mata, my combination.
Yeah, you can have it. It's either you or Steve Corica. So
obviously I'm far smarter about football than he is. In my infinite footballing wisdom, Tommy Smith win an eye. He's doing all right. Like, everyone was talking shit. He was too slow. What's he doing playing for Auckland FC? But he has stepped in for, what's the Aussie centre back?
Dan Hall.
And then I think Nando Zyon Maiu'u he got injured during that game. So then Tommy Smithwood and he went into centre back, and he stayed at centre back, but then Sakai came into centre back.
Smith did swap from right sided to left side, but that's
Yeah.
probably more his natural spot anyway, is the left sided centre back. So yeah.
And then Callan Elliott went to right back, and Tommy Smithwood and he's doing a job at centre back. Like, that's just good depth. You got a veteran, he's reliable, he's doing the job. And again, he's doing the job for the best defense in the A-League. Like, it's not like he's just doing a job for a crappy defense. He is playing his part in a good defense. So I do want to shout out, obviously it's the theme of the podcast, so I have to shout out Tommy Smithwood and because he's Tommy Smithwood and not a Y. But he's doing a good job at centre back, so shout out to him.
Yeah, I agreed entirely. I was one of the people who were very worried that he was going to, that the lack of pace would be something that gets exposed, but I just don't think it has been. I think he's very well positioned. He's a very organized player. He's been great in the air. He's winning a lot of those headers. He's very good on the ball, and he's good enough on the ball that it doesn't really matter that he's playing on the right side of defense. He's played plenty there in the past. He's an experienced player who can do either. But he's, he knows how to collect the ball, and he knows how to keep it moving. That's all you got to do in that spot as a centre back. And yeah, you're not seeing, I guess maybe the way that Auckland line up is they are a little bit of a deeper back line, so there's not as much space in behind necessarily. So the speed of the centre backs doesn't have to be exposed in that way. Or it doesn't necessarily matter that much as well. And you've got a sweeping defensive midfielder in Louis Verstraete who is doing a lot of the engaging the other team, like jumping into tackles and stopping them and making sure they're not running straight at you anyway. So I don't think it's been an issue at all. And apart from that, the only other question with Smithy was whether at his age he'd just be able to play week after week and without getting injured or fatigued or whatever. And so far, so good on that count too. I think he's done beautifully. And since he came back in from Hall, they had a couple of weeks where they were starting Sakai there. Since Smith came back into that partnership, that was when they rediscovered the defensive form that they were showing at the start of the season. So yeah, I think he's been great and he deserves a shout out.
It's not like there's a lot of speed in the Auckland FC defense either. So it's like, at some point, you're just a good defense. It doesn't matter how fast you are. Because Franny de Vries, he's not lightning down the left flank. Sakai isn't necessarily the fastest defender either. Callan Elliott's a bit of a whippet, but Nando Pinocchio's not very fast. Dan Hall wasn't very fast. Verstraete's not very fast. At some point, you're just a good defense because guys are in the right position at the right time, and they work together. So I kind of think maybe a lesson to you. I'll happily teach you this lesson. Just chill out on the speed of a centre back. It doesn't really matter if you're a good defensive team, let alone when you got the best goalie in the competition behind you as well. So I think you can. There's so many other ways to play defense without necessarily the speed. And as you're talking, I was like, okay, well, who's actually fast for Auckland FC? I don't think there's anyone. Maybe you could say Gillian's a bit of a whippet. He's kind of...
Well, yeah, the wingers are quick. Randall's fast. Gillian's fast. Rogerson's fast. I expect Moreno's fast. Mai seems pretty... the attackers are all pretty quick. Not Max Mata, but he's,
But I don't think they're above average for their positions. I think they're,
Rogerson and Randall, I think, would be.
Right.
But maybe that's part of this too, is that they're the wingers, right? They get back and cover. That's something that's been talked about a lot, is they get back and they cover that distance. So the fullbacks don't have to cover the distance. So the defensive midfielder doesn't have to cover the distance. And I'm trying to think of this might just be because I haven't looked for it specifically, and so I'm missing instances, but just based on vibes, based on memories, I can't picture Auckland FC getting counterattacked a whole lot. And that's the main situation where speed is a big focus. If you're going to be a team that likes to play in broken play, like the Phoenix do, you are going to try to counterattack yourself, but you're also, because of that, those are vulnerable situations, those transitional things where the ball's changing possession. If you're counterattacking a lot yourself, you're probably going to get counterattacked a lot in return. The Phoenix have issues with that sometimes, but I think they do have a bit of... they have a similar thing where they have a defensive midfielder who knows how to get across and stop those attacks, and they have wingers who get back and defend, and that that part of it is quite similar. But Auckland FC just don't seem like a team that gets counterattacked a lot. In that case, you just don't. Yeah, the speed doesn't get exposed very much, and then it's just not, it's just not a factor. It's just not a part of the game. They force teams to build up more slowly against them, and then what you're actually facing is a lot of shots from distance and crosses, and that's exactly what they want to deal with. They don't concede a lot of shots at all, but they do, I think, give up a fair few crosses. But then Dan Hall, Nando Pinecker especially, and then now Tommy Smith, like they just win the headers. And Alex Paulson's good at that stuff, and has actually, I think, this season shown an improvement in how well he's attacked the aerial stuff as well. So, like, they just deal with it. That's how they defend, and they're good at it.
It's also very hard to counterattack if the defense is ready for you. So
yeah,
I don't know
how there's nothing to counter. Yeah,
I don't know how you can counterattack against Auckland FC, because like De Vries and Sakai are very smart footballers. So if the ball's going up on the right, De Vries is chilling. If the ball's going up on the left, Sakai's chilling. Pinecker, Dan Hall, Tommy Smith, very good defenders who are just always going to be in the right place. And you've got Verstraete in front of them, who's always protecting the defense. So if you've got like two of your defenders going upfield, Verstraete's just chilling. So then you've got three defenders at the back, but also Alex Paulson. So he's communicating, but he's also, like, I don't think Alex Paulson, wait, let me put it this way. Alex Paulson, he's always standing outside his box. Like, he seems like a goalkeeper who would love to just go stand on halfway if he could. So right then, he's like, okay, ball goes over the top, Paulson's onto it already. But if they're not playing over the top and behind the Auckland FC defense, he's communicating. So that he's organising the defense in front of him. And I just kind of feel like Auckland FC, this is something I'll watch for coming up this weekend, is because I think it was a Barcelona thing back in the day where they just like, it was a rule. You always had to have three defenders defending, ready to defend. No matter where the ball was, you got three guys back, ready, and the goalkeeper. I feel like that's something that Auckland FC do, just right now, thinking about it. But you've also got Paulson, the best goalie, so that's a recipe for no counter-attacking. So there you go, just solve the riddle.
Yeah, I think they're very, because I remember stats from earlier on in the season about how they were the team that wins the most ball in the opposition half. I think they're just, in general, they're very combative. They get into those tackles in the midfield, for Strider especially. That's how you stop a counterattack, because you can't just, there's no clean path to run because you're always engaged with someone. Like there's someone sticking a foot in, right? And if you give away the foul, again, this is a Barcelona thing. This is a Manchester City Guardiola thing as well. Like if you lose the ball, just foul quickly. And then you can get everyone back and you're set. You just never see that Auckland FC defense out of shape.
I've never felt it watching a football team, especially a football team like I'm emotionally invested in. Equally invested, Auckland FC and Wellington Phoenix, just FYI, but I am emotionally invested in those two teams. I am confident that Auckland FC can win the ball up the other end of the field. I expect it. Like, they're all just pouncing. Like, Mize, a terror. Mata works hard. Rogerson works hard. Gillian works hard. Galios, he's working hard. But, if you want to play out against Auckland FC, I'm confident that they will win the ball at some point. And if they don't win it on that move, they're going to win it on the next move. And as you said, that's the best way to start your defensive setup, is with your strikers and with your attacking midfielders winning the ball off the opposition defense, because then bang, you got a shot right away. So good stuff. But I think we need to keep it moving because we haven't even got to the Super Smash yet.
No, let's do some Super Smash.
Wellington Blaze, obviously champions, and Central District Stags champions. Let's start with the Wellington Blaze. As I said, Amelia Kerr, legendary stuff. And a key and interesting, maybe a bit dramatic point about Amelia Kerr, although I do want to highlight that there's a few other players with there in Amelia Kerr. So Amelia Kerr and Jess Kerr, they've played at least 7 games in the last 8 Super Smash seasons, in which the Wellington Blaze have won 6 of those championships. Sophie Devine has played at least 7 games just twice. Now, I haven't done the numbers, but I would suggest Jess McFadyen, Rebecca Burns, maybe Caitlin King, they're in the same ballpark. Like Jess McFadyen and Lee Casbrick more recently, Zara Jetley more recently, they're playing a lot of games in this dynasty. And when you say Wellington Blaze dynasty, I think a lot of people are thinking Sophie Devine. Sophie Devine has been fantastic. She is one of the most, if not the most dominant Super Smash player ever, because she hits centuries. Like Amelia Kerr hasn't hit centuries in this period. She has 3, maybe 4 times as many 50s as Sophie Devine, but she doesn't have the centuries. But Amelia Kerr's played twice as many games as Sophie Devine. Amelia Kerr's played 81 games, Jess Kerr's played 79 games, Sophie Devine's played 42 games. So if we're talking about a Wellington Blaze team that is, and I was thinking about updating this because Auckland City, I did maybe a little, what's it called, the old Freudian slip, whatever. I did reference Auckland FC as Auckland City just earlier, but Auckland City, they did win the National League, I think, recently, end of last year?
Yeah.
Or the Chatham Cup?
They made the Chatham Cup final, they won the National League final.
Yeah, so that's put them back in the dynasty stakes.
Yeah.
Because you've got the old Christian Crusaders from Christchurch. They love a dynasty as well. They might love a religious dynasty as well. But along with the Wellington Blaze, like they're the dynastic teams of Aotearoa sport. And I do want to highlight Auckland City because they did bounce back. Like they were out of the mix for a little bit, but they did add another championship to their resume. So shout out to them. But Wellington Blaze have a dynasty, the best dynasty in New Zealand sport. 6 Super Smash championships in the last 8 seasons. And Amelia Kerr's played twice as many games as Sophie Devine. So going back to the Amelia Kerr greatness angle, who's more influential in the Wellington Blaze dynasty? Now, Sophie Devine was the leader. Amelia Kerr's following her lead for most of those championships. But at this point, Amelia Kerr has won a lot of Super Smash championships. She's played twice as many games as Sophie Devine. And she's gone back to back in the last 2 years. Well, in this back-to-back Wellington Blaze championship period, well, we've got Amelia Kerr playing 10 games, then 12 games. We've got Amelia Kerr scoring 437 runs, then 441 runs. We've got Amelia Kerr taking 20 wickets, then 15 wickets. Meanwhile, Sophie Devine scored 16 runs, then 38 runs. She took 2 wickets, then she took 8 wickets. So the Wellington Blaze have gone back-to-back with Super Smash championships without much contribution from Sophie Devine. To me, that only elevates what Amelia Kerr is doing. Because now she's the captain, now she's the leader, and she is dragging the Wellington Blaze to continue this dynasty. Without the player, many people would point to and saying she is responsible for the dynasty. Now it's Amelia Kerr. So shout out to Amelia Kerr, shout out to the Wellington Blaze. You also had fantastic seasons from Jess Kerr. Amelia Kerr, Jess Kerr, Rebecca Burns all hit 350s. This was, Jess Kerr scored 300 runs, and this is her first Super Smash scoring over 100 runs. Rebecca Burns, this is her second Super Smash scoring over 200 runs, but her first Super Smash with more than 150 plus score. She scored 3. So Jess Kerr and Rebecca Burns with the bat outplayed all their previous Super Smash seasons. Jess Kerr was the second leading wicket taker, so obviously she's always fantastic with the ball. Wellington Blaze were also without Lee Kasprick. She only played 2, maybe 3 games. Again, another player you think of when you're thinking Wellington Blaze dynasty. Zara Jetley, consistently one of the best Super Smash spinners of the last 5 years. She didn't play finals weekend. Didn't play Saturday, didn't play Sunday. Jess McFadden, best wicketkeeper in New Zealand. I think that is undeniable at this point. And then Wellington Blaze also have this import angle as well, because they had Elise Perry, Maitland Brown, Hannah Darlington, Aussie imports, all 3. I think they've previously, they had Grace Harris, I think, and Charlie Knott. So the Wellington Blaze always have high quality imports. I don't think any of them are as good as Chamari Atapatu though. So you could point at the Wellington Blaze and say, well, they get, Elise Perry. She came in. Oh my, Wellington Blaze, they got Maitland Brown and Hannah Darlington. What's doing? They get the best imports. That's why they win. Chamari Atapatu, to me, is the best import. Maybe doesn't impact winning. Holly Armitage, statistically, she has a case as the best import, but the Central Hinds sucked. Armitage is an English international. In the Blaze, Atapatu and Armitage, they played almost full seasons for their teams. The Wellington Blaze, their imports, they're always short term. Elise Perry, couple games. Maitland Brown and Helen Darlington, couple games at the end of the season. And they're all okay, so Lee Kasprick's out injured, then you get Maitland Brown. Sophie Devine's out for personal reasons, Darlington comes in. It's not easy to integrate those players for a couple of games. But that's the environment that Amelia Kerr leads. Not only is she the best batter, the best bowler, the best fielder, the best captain, you could make a case that she's Jess Kerr, Rebecca Burns, they've always been pretty good, but Amelia Kerr's environment, the Wellington Blaze environment, ensures that Maitland Brown, Darlington and Perry settle straight in. That they perform for the couple of games they're playing, but at the same time, that environment brings the best out of Nicole Baird, really solid lefty. It gets the best out of Sam McKinder, Natasha Kodaya. I think it's Hannah Bryant. These players, Rachel Bryant, sorry. These players don't do anything with the bat or the ball. Nicole Baird does a lot with the ball, but earlier in the season, she wasn't bowling as much. But I'm looking at Sam McInder, Natasha Kodaya, Rachel Bryant, youngsters like Kate Chandler and Hannah Francis, who played 2 games each before going to the Under-19 World Cup. In this Wellington Blaze team, you can be in the team, but you don't do anything. You do something because Sam McKinder took a bunch of catches. You still need to play your part and do your job, but you don't bat because you don't need a bat. There's other batters doing the job. You're not going to bowl. Natasha Kodaya, to me, is one of the best young seamers in New Zealand. She bowled 3.4 overs. She played every game and didn't bowl much. That's the role the young players have to play for the Wellington Blaze, which could be very niggly. But they do their job. The same way the imports do their job for 4 games. So to me, that is a credit to the Wellington Blaze environment. Then you've also got the fact that Lance Dry was their coach for a lot of their recent championships. He stopped being the coach just before the Super Smash. Then they get Jonathan Bassett-Graham. He comes in as coach, and they win the championship. So that means the Wellington Blaze have won back-to-back Super Smash championships with a different coach. Like, it just gets more and more impressive. It's kind of crazy. And to add to that, Otago had 2 wins over Wellington during the season. Both were by 7 wickets. One was in Wellington, one was in Dunedin. Yes. Wellington first, then Dunedin, both by 7 wickets. And the Wellington Blaze, they had to win both games over the weekend. They scored 133 for 6 and then rolled Northern Brave for 110. They only scored 104 for 8 in the final. And they restricted Otago to 96 for 9. So they didn't score enough runs, but it didn't matter because they have excellent bowlers, but in the field they have Amelia Kerr, who has this presence. It's like, there's a couple of observations about it. Like, she was always high-fiving the bowler just to connect with them, make sure they're on the same wavelength, the same vibration. And then, okay, so Otago lose some early wickets, and Amelia Kerr hasn't even bowled yet. I'm scared of what's going to happen next. Because if Amelia Kerr hasn't even bowled and she's coming on to bowl, it's like anticipation. But then you also have the Blaze squeeze. They do the best of this. They're like, okay, a couple wickets fall, you're not getting out of that hole. Like, the Blaze are tightening up. Fielders are on point. Like, Caitlin King is patrolling the boundary to the extent where you're like, she's a specialist fielder in this team. Like, they take that role so seriously, and it's led by Amelia Kerr and her aggressive, attacking, ruthless instincts. And I was even going deeper. I was like, so I've absorbed a bit of Ashes, women's Ashes coverage. And everything that England wants, everything that England lacks, the stuff they talk about they don't do well, the stuff they want to do better at, basically the stuff that Australia does, all that's encapsulated in Amelia Kerr. Like, Amelia Kerr is more of an Australian type of cricketer than an English type of cricketer. And I think if the White Ferns, if we're moving into the Amelia Kerr era for the White Ferns, I think they can reclaim their status as one of the best women's teams in the world. Because it's the aggression, the ruthlessness, the athleticism, the skill, the winning instincts. Those are things that England lack when they're playing against Australia, not when they're playing against New Zealand, because they just beat up New Zealand, but hopefully that can change. But I also think it's a lot of attributes that the rest of the women's cricketing world also lacks. So I want to follow Amelia Ferns into the White Ferns. I want to follow her into this new era of the White Ferns. And everything I've talked about with the Wellington Blaze here, I think can be a successful recipe for the White Ferns moving forward. Central Stags, well, shout out to Canterbury. There's no dynasty there. Canterbury Kings. The opposite, grand final dynasty.
Yeah, there could have been.
They've lost 5 consecutive Super Smash finals. So if you're out there, pour some out for the Canterbury Kings, spark one up. And they lost again to the Central Stags. Central Stags, who I think they won in 2018, 2019. And when they won in 2018, 2019, can you guess their leading run scorer and leading wicket taker?
What's that? 6 years ago. Tom Bruce and Blair Tickner.
Bang on.
Really?
Tom Bruce in 2018-19, 353 runs. 2024-25, 339 runs. Similar amount of runs. Blair Tickner, same amount of wickets. 16 wickets in each run. So those two dudes have led Central Stags to Super Smash championships, and they deserve a shout out. Especially Blair Tickner, like, he's not opening the bowling. He was the last bowler used, and he went for like 4 RPO in the final. So that was good. we had a, oh my God, Angus Shaw's opening the bowling by one commentator, and then the other commentator says Angus Shaw's opening the bowling in every game. And that's what he does. So he was pretty tidy. Obviously, Will Young's very good. Jack Boyle had a fantastic season. Dane Cleaver was impactful as well. Jaden Lennox, like Ajaz Patel didn't play in the Super Smash. Jaden Lennox got the job done as the lead spinner. But then Angus Shaw was only slightly worse than Jaden Lennox with the ball. But Angus Shaw also just whacked boundaries as an all-rounder. There's 3 dudes I want to zone in on behind Bruce and Tickner, though. Toby Finlay, William Clark, and Curtis Heafy. Toby Finlay, he got some tail-ender wickets, but they were big wickets. Toby Finlay dismissed Daryl Mitchell in the 17th over. Dismissed Henry Shipley in the 20th over, and Matt Henry in the 20th over. That restricted Canterbury to 135 for 8. Canterbury could have got 150. And Toby Finlay is a young seamer who folks probably don't know a lot about. Remember, the Super Smash started with me talking up 17-year-old Mason Clark from Otago. Jacob Duffy came back into the team, Mason Clark dropped out. So then I had to go like, okay, who's next? Who's the next up seamer? Folks know a lot about Jock McKenzie. Everyone knows Zach Fox. Everyone knows Will O'Rourke. But then Toby Finlay settles into the Central Stags first 11, and he's bowling heat. He's taken wickets with full pace. He's bowling wickets with bounces. He's bowling wickets with slower balls. He's just a very good young seamer who he played one Plunket Shield game a few summers ago. Other than that, this is his first major dose of domestic cricket. So he was very impressive, let alone Will Clark and Curtis Heafy. We talked about this on Thursday in our bonus podcast. Wait, so Toby Finlay got better through the Super Smash. Got to say this. No wickets in his first 2 games, and then he took 2 wickets, 1 wicket, 2 wickets, 3 wickets. So as the Super Smash got more like worked towards a climax, Toby Finlay got better as a 21-year-old seamer. Same for Curtis Heafy. Last 5 games, he opened the batting with 10 runs at 111 strike rate. Then he opened the batting, scored 78 runs at a strike rate of 137. Curtis Heafy, good opening batter. But then Will Young comes back into the team. So Curtis Heafy, he goes down to 4. 12 not out at 67 strike rate, but that's when no other CD batter scored over 10 runs. When Kyle Jamieson and Matt Henry were ripping through CD before the rain came at Hagley Oval. So Curtis Heafy goes down to number 4, and he's their best batter in half an innings. Versus Auckland, he's batting 7 not out with a strike rate of 233, not out to win the game, or not out to set up the run chase. Batting 6 in the final, 13 not out, 150 strike rate to seal the win. Curtis Heafy has 3 not out scores in his last 3 games, batting in 3 different roles. As a 21-year-old. Who also averages 50 in one-day cricket and 37.4 in first-class cricket. That seems pretty impressive. I've talked a lot more about Will Clark over the last summer and a bit. He finished 17 not out with a strike rate of 170, didn't bowl, but he is a very good all-rounder. And folks don't know about Will Clark. But this dude is producing at a high level for the CD Stags. He is 23 years old, first class batting average 42, one day batting average 39.7, T20s averaging 25 with a strike rate of 120, and he's averaging 35 or less in all three formats with the ball. You could make a case that William Clark is better than Jock McKenzie right now. You could make a case he's better than Mohamed Abbas. So don't overlook Will Clark when we're talking about Aotearoa's best young cricketers. And along with Curtis Heafy and Toby Finlay, they just won a Super Smash championship. But Tom Bruce and Blair Tickner won another one. So shout out to them. I'm not going to let you speak because we did have the Zyon Maiu'u news about him departing New Zealand Warriors and going to the Bulldogs. Unless you got some expertise you'd like to offer, maybe a bit of Dragons insight because you got your own little middle forward drama happening there with one of the Molo brothers.
Yeah, one of them. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of want to hear about Zyon Maiu'u and not have to think about the Dragons for a while.
First thing I'll say here is that New Zealand Warriors fans need to become comfortable with players leaving New Zealand Warriors. Simply because when you have much more junior teams, you're going to have many more players leaving the Warriors, right? If you've got a under-17 team that just won the Harold Matthews competition last year, you've got an under-19 team, you've got an under-21 team, you've got a New South Wales Cup team, and you've got the NRL squad, well, players are going to leave that system, and we've already had players leave the under-17 team to go to Australia. Jackson Stewart, he was starting centre for the Roosters and SG Ball this weekend. Carwyn Patterson was starting hooker for the Bulldogs. Hudson Frost, he was starting prop for the Sharks. There was also Ezekiel Whangaaiti, who has left the Warriors and he's gone to the Knights, where he was on the bench in SG Ball. So right there, the fact that you had Jackson Stewart, Patterson, and who else did I say? Hudson Frost. They left the Warriors under-17 team and they were straight into starting roles at under-19 level in Australia. So that right there tells you that the Warriors have desirable talent. Let alone the fact that you've got a bunch of other players who have left the Warriors to go to Australian clubs at higher levels. So not only do Warriors fans need to become comfortable with players leaving the Warriors, especially junior players, it's like you gotta view it as a positive for the Warriors because the Warriors have desirable talent. Like, players left the Warriors and went into starting roles for Australian teams at a higher age group. These players are good. Other teams want them. That means the New Zealand Warriors system is firing on all cylinders, which I have consistently said and I believe since the two Andes took over. Zyon Maiu'u, to me, this is a fairly simple move to break down. It would only get more complicated if the Warriors were to sign another prop. The sketchy thing here is that there's always noise about the Warriors signing another prop. They always need another prop. Like, that has been the story for the last 3 years. That's been another storyline since the two Andes took over. The Warriors need another prop. So there's always rumours, there's always whispers, there's always little bits and pieces floating around from your uncle's auntie who told you the Warriors are going to sign another prop. That could happen. And depending on who that prop is, this observation might look foolish, but it's pretty interesting considering that the Bulldogs have a smaller forward pack that needs a little bit more oomph. And the Warriors have a forward pack that needs to get a bit smaller and a bit faster. The Warriors team in general, they need to get faster. They need to get more mobile. They need to get more agile. And I think they've done that with a few of their signings and possible team selections. We've talked about it. If you get Tane Tuapiki in your team, you get Luke Metcalf in your team, you get Aaron Clark in your team, you're getting faster. Those three dudes didn't play a whole lot of football for the Warriors. Aaron Clark didn't play any last year. And the Warriors were very, very slow last year. Tohu Harris slow, Sean Johnson slow for their positions. Sprinkled him like Roger Tuivasa-Sheck isn't very fast. Rocco Berry's not very fast. Tamaita Martin's not very fast. Wade Egan isn't an explosive dummy half runner. So we observed last year that the Warriors were slow. So you got one team that wants to get faster and more mobile. You've got another team that needs more oomph. So the team that needs more oomph signs Zyon Maiu'u, because he offers a lot of oomph. So for Bulldogs fans, what can you expect if you sign Zyon Maiu'u? He's going to run it straight and he's going to run it hard. We were graced with Zyon Maiu'u running it straight at Mount Smart Stadium. It was a thing of beauty. If I take my Warriors hat off, I put my Kiwi NRL hat on, and I'm thinking, what's the best case for Zyon Maiu'u? It's running it straight in front of the crazy Bulldogs fans. Ideally, at Belmore. So Bulldogs, I don't know if Bulldogs fans, I don't know if Zyon Maiu'u will be a top 17 player round one. But he will get an opportunity, because he runs hard and he runs straight and he is an enforcer in the middle of the field. And he's going to do that for you in the NRL. 10 minutes, 20 minutes off the bench. Maybe if he develops and the Bulldogs have a need, he could churn out 30 minutes off the bench. Thing to look forward to for a Bulldogs fan, though, is Zyon Maiu'u running it straight in front of you. Not at you, because that would be disastrous, but running it straight in front of you. Whether you're at the big Sydney Stadium, whatever it's called, which is always a pretty intense atmosphere with all those Bulldogs fans, that's going to be enjoyable. And that is going to fill you with energy when you see Zyon Maiu'u running it straight. Better yet, he does it at Belmore. And that's even crazier. For the Warriors fans, Zyon Maiu'u was not in the top 17 for the Warriors. I didn't even have him in my funky 17. I don't think he's a top 20 player for the Warriors either. Yes, you'd like to keep Zyon Maiu'u, but the thing is, if Zyon Maiu'u has a better offer, which basically means NRL game time at the Bulldogs, and I will also note Zyon Maiu'u's younger sister, Jezreel, she's playing for either Illawarra or St. George in the Under-19 Tasha Gale Cup. So she's already in Sydney. So there's a family connection in Sydney there. But I don't believe the Warriors said to Zyon Maiu'u, you gotta go. I believe the Bulldogs, using their love of New Zealand Rugby League, using their in-depth knowledge of New Zealand Rugby League, the Bulldogs knew all about Zyon Maiu'u, and the Bulldogs may have said to Zyon Maiu'u, here's a better contract, and here's more opportunity to play NRL footy than you're going to get at the Warriors, because again, based on the needs of the two forward packs and based how the two forward packs are built, there is more chance for Zyon Maiu'u to play NRL at the Bulldogs than the Warriors. And the Warriors already have, if Bunty Afoa is not playing for the Warriors in the NRL, I don't think Zyon Maiu'u is going to play NRL. They are similar players. They just run it straight. They don't have the passing game that I think Andrew Webster wants. They do not have the footwork that I think Andrew Webster wants. They don't have the sideways agility and mobility that I think Andrew Webster wants. Dimitri Vaimonga has that. Leka Halasima has that. Tom Ale's faster, more agile. And you've already got Bantia forward there. So to me, Zyon Maiu'u and the Warriors squad rankings that I'm just thinking up right now, he might be player number 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. He doesn't have any utility value, which Dimitri Vaimonga has, which Leka Halasima has, which Mitch Barnett has, Marata Niokore has, and by that I mean they can play edge and middle. Zyon Maiu'u is just a straight up, run it straight prop. Again, the Bulldogs need that. The Warriors may not need that as much. Again, this could all look silly if the Warriors sign a prop. But there's also a lot more Zyon Maiu'us coming through the development system. So again, goes back to the idea. Warriors fans, you need to become comfortable with players leaving the Warriors system, and you probably need to relax into that comfort, like your favorite couch, because there's a lot more coming through. There's a lot more coming through. What does Tanner Stowers-Smith have? He's pretty similar to James Fisher-Harris in how he plays through the middle. He might not be better than Zyon Maiu'u, but he's right there. He wants an opportunity, and I believe he's a more like a Andrew Webster style of middle forward. Idi Iramia Toiava. Last year in New South Wales Cup, he played prop, he played edge, he played centre. He wants a crack at NRL footy, I reckon. Who is, and this will test your Warriors' knowledge, who is the most famous cult hero at the Warriors, assuming he's still with the Warriors, because this is the murky estuary waters of the NRL transfer market. Who is the cult hero in the Warriors system below the NRL level? Do you know?
I thought you were going to ask all time there for a second, and I was gearing up to say like Ali Lauatiti or something, but who I think has a nephew in the Warrior system, doesn't he? But
yeah, don't say that with any uncertainty. It's Ali Leotawa. Like, obviously, we
that's
know
right.
that.
Yeah. But not just in the system; he's in the first team. Like he's the first grade player. So
hold that thought. Hold that thought.
Oh,
I'm gonna drop this.
Thought held.
My funky Warriors top 17. Tain Tuapiki at fullback. Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, Dallin Watene-Zalesniak on the wings. Shans Nickel-Krogstar, Ali Leotawa in the centres. We've got Tamaita Martin halfback, Luke Metcalf number 6. Front row, James Fisher-Harris, Marata Niokore, Wade Egan at hooker. My edges, Mitchell Barnett, Kirk Capewell. My starting lock, Aaron Clark. No, my starting lock's Dylan Walker. Me bench, Chanel Harris-Tavita, Aaron Clark, Dimitri Vaimonga, Leka Halasima. That's my funky 17. I don't think that will happen. I want it to happen. But even in that funky 17, okay, fringe forwards in that funky 17 rotation, we got Tom Ale, Bunty forward, Jacob Laban, Jackson Ford. There's 4 dudes right there who are probably ahead of Zyon Maiu'u. Let alone Jacob Laban, who's an edge forward. So that's just a funky perspective. It's not what I expect to happen. It's not a predicted team, but that shows you the options available. Back to you trying to figure out it's super underground. But it's so underground, it's not underground because any Warriors fan knows about this dude, even though he hasn't played New South Wales. He's played like a couple of minutes in New South Wales Cup.
Right. So not Leka Halasima, but someone who maybe was in the position, or maybe is in the position that Leka Halasima was maybe 2 years ago when he was 17 years old and playing at that kind of level.
No, because Leka Halasima I have as a top 17 player, and he's like 18 years old. He's a freak of nature. He's probably better than Zyon Maiu'u, where this dude I'm talking about is older. He's already played under 21s.
I know. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I got you.
Hit me.
Toby Crosby.
Toby Crosby. So, do the Warriors keep Zyon Maiu'u and Toby Crosby goes elsewhere? Or do the Warriors release Zyon Maiu'u and develop someone like Toby Crosby? Because Toby Crosby is not even the best. Rodney Tuipulotu Vaea is younger than Toby Crosby, and he's done more than Toby Crosby for the Warriors. There's also Jason Salolilo, who has a train and trial contract coming out of Christchurch as a middle forward. Looks like a unit. Now, we have to wait and see how the New South Wales squad is named. Is Toby Crosby still around? But that's the depth we're talking about here with the Warriors. So again, ask yourself this simple fact. Would you be more disappointed if Toby Crosby left the Warriors or if Zyon Maiu'u left the Warriors? Because Toby Crosby has done some crazy shit in the lower grades. To the extent where a lot of people know about him and he hasn't done much at the New South Wales Cup level. Another little wrinkle for the Warriors. They have consistently shown that if you have a better offer, they will be generous to you in working with you to get you released from your contract. So there's a few methods of operation trends that I've seen. The Warriors do their business quietly. And they do their business wholesomely. Because I believe Zyon Maiu'u had a better offer from the Bulldogs, and the Warriors could have said, nah, Bolt, you got to stay here. You're under contract. But the Warriors tend not to do that. The Warriors say, okay, that's what you want. We understand your position. We're going to work with you to make that happen. It's all good. But this isn't any NRL team that Zyon Maiu'u is going to. This is the Bulldogs. This is the Bulldogs that is a team, and Zyon Maiu'u, if he's in the team, he might be, well, they've got Satili Tupanuia, Maris Jr., so they might have 2 Kiwi NRL juniors in the NRL team at some point this year. Last year, they had none. But this weekend, the Bulldogs, Tasha Gale Cup, under-19s, women's, they had a 48-4 victory over the North Sydney Bears. They scored 10 tries. 9 of those tries were scored by young ladies from New Zealand. 3 of them were scored by Lanaya Daniel from Waitakere College. We also had Samina Lokatui scored 2. Josina Felici Tauli'i scored 1. Halfback Shaquela Mahakito Monshao scored 1. We had Tiani Fesolai scored 1. And Maya Talamaivao, she scored 1. Who did all the goal kicking? Well, who kicked goals successfully? Because they don't seem to list the missed conversion, so we don't know. That was Maria Faulkner-Luke, who was a late inclusion into the halves. She's a Hibiscus Coast junior. So the Bulldogs under-19 women's team, 9 out of their 10 tries were scored from young ladies from Aotearoa. Across both Bulldogs under-19 teams, they had 4 starting halves. 3 of them are from New Zealand. Because Faulkner-Luke was a late inclusion at 5'8", and of course we've got Captain Shaquila Mahakita Monshao, who went to Waitakere College and St. Peter's College, along with Lanaya Daniel, who I think is her younger sister. But Mahakita Monshao already has an NRLW contract. The Bulldogs SG ball team, they got Bronson Rubin in the halves from Kaiapoi in Canterbury. You see what I'm getting at here? 9 out of 10 tries scored by young ladies from Aotearoa. The conversions done by a young lady from Aotearoa. 3 out of the 4 starting halves in the Bulldogs under-19 teams from Aotearoa. The SG Ball team also had Genesis Arkham Sherlock from Christchurch, Carwyn Patterson from Auckland, Sasaya Alatini from Christchurch. The Bulldogs love Aotearoa. Any NRL team from Australia that loves Aotearoa, I love them. And the Bulldogs are going so far and beyond every other NRL team from Australia in recruiting from Aotearoa that it is no surprise that they have chosen Zyon Maiu'u. Now, of course, some other deals might not have worked out. I think they're in the mix for Pahulu from the Titans. They've always been in the market. But when they needed a player, they used their tentacles in Aotearoa to get to Zyon Maiu'u from the Warriors. So again, it's no surprise to me that he has gone to the Bulldogs. Because the Bulldogs are the busiest Australian NRL team in recruiting from Aotearoa right now. It's not the Roosters. The Sharks go pretty hard. Like, there's a couple of dudes up in Queensland doing some nice stuff in the Broncos and Titans systems. The Knights are very busy in recruiting from Aotearoa as well. None of them are doing as much as the Bulldogs. So yeah, I just think it's a good deal. Good deal. Good deal for all parties. Zyon Maiu'u far more likely to play NRL. I think the Warriors have good depth in that position, but they also have depth that is better suited to their needs and their style of football, whereas Zyon Maiu'u is better suited to the Bulldogs' needs and their style of football. But I did have another point I was going to say. Yeah, but I can't think of it right now. But I will touch on, just quickly round up some try scorers in SG Ball. We had Kanan Mageli. He scored a try for the Roosters SG Ball team. So again, the Roosters, they got Jackson Stewart starting at centre. Mageli was starting prop. He's from De La Salle College, Marist Jr. And I think Josiah Fesalai is another one, but I can't think of that off the top of my head at the end of this monstrous podcast. Tipene Thompson from Turangi, I believe, scored a try for the Sharks SG Ball team as well. The Warriors had an SG Ball team loss to the Manly Seagulls, but they had an under-17 Harold Matthews Cup victory against the Seagulls. In the under-17 game, Bishop Neal scored 2 tries. So again, you're thinking about young talent coming through the Warriors system, Bishop Neal might be the best of them all. Because his pedigree is crazy. Like, he's been a key figure for St. Thomas of Canterbury being the best rugby league school in Aotearoa. He was the tournament MVP at the National Secondary Schools Tournament last year while being named in the under-16 tournament team. This dude is a dominant player, and he scored 2 tries in the, I think it was his first under-17 game. I think the Warriors, they develop players slowly, but I can see Bishop Neal stepping up to under-19s, and to be honest, I can see Bishop Neal challenging for a Jersey Flegg spot if they want to really fast-track his development. Try scorers for the Warriors SG Ball team, Haraka Waitai Hainga, he's coming out of Hamilton Boys. Mayhana Pauling, coming out of Horswell and St. Thomas of Canterbury and Christchurch, Compton, Purcell, St. Paul's College, and a Marist Saints Junior. And that's all I can think of right now. Do you, did I explain that where the Zyon Maiu'u deal to the Bulldogs and the Bulldogs' history, well, not their history, but what they're doing with the Kiwi NRL recruitment and the young and the NRL Wahine recruitment? Does it just seem sensible to you?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, there's the element of one team perhaps needs that skill set a little bit more than the other team needs it. There's the element of them just having their finger on the pulse with Kiwi Rugby League and just having, I mean, maybe they're the Nottingham Forest of the NRL or something. You know, they're just, and when you sign a few, you're going to get those kind of those links to more as well. Like it's going to open up the avenues because you're speaking to agents or recruiters or people even maybe from New Zealand Rugby League or whatever running some of these tournaments and things like that. Like you're just going to have connections. It's going to open up the possibility of being able to sign more players. And if you're doing your scouting properly, you're looking at you go in there to look at one player and you end up noticing a couple others that might stand, like all these little things that add up together to yeah, I think that to make that make a lot of sense. And then at the bottom line just seems to be the point about like the Warriors have a perspective, the Bulldogs have a perspective, but also Zyon Maiu'u has a perspective, right? And if he's being offered a better deal with probably more money, but we don't know that, but we definitely know he seems to be able to. This seems to be a position where he's going to have more NRL opportunities. We know that is clear enough. Well, then that's kind of how it goes. Like you sort of have to, as the Warriors, you kind of have to respect that. And if you're not going to sign him now, then we might, if you don't, I mean, if you don't release him now, then perhaps you might get a year of him playing New South Wales Cup, and then he leaves after the end of his contract, whenever that may be. Well, then you might as well use that New South Wales Cup spot to develop someone else, if that's the case. If there's someone with a long-term future at the club, like all these kind of ramifications that you might have for someone outside the top 17, and add it all together, it just like it does seem like just a logical move from all angles. A very un-Doncic move in that way.
You did allude to a key point that I want to finish with. I do appreciate your Nottingham Forest comparison, but
yeah,
out of respect of what the Bulldogs are doing, they don't have connections in Aotearoa. They have a base in Aotearoa. They have development camps. They have a relationship, an official pathways relationship with Canterbury Rugby League. They have, like, all those players who scored tries in the under-19 Tasha Gale Cup team, they have lived together under the Bulldogs umbrella. The Bulldogs are investing in New Zealand. They don't just like have scouting connections and like, oh, he's a nice player. No, they have a network of people already in New Zealand right now. They have development camps in New Zealand. They have relationships with clubs, schools throughout Aotearoa already. And that's only increasing. So you better get used to it if you're from Aotearoa. You better get used to it if you're from Australia, especially a Bulldogs fan. And then I'll come back to the Warriors. This is a new time for the Warriors. This is a time of abundance. There will be someone else stepping up to replace Zyon Maiu'u. Don't worry about it. Yes, I already viewed Zyon Maiu'u as a cult hero, so it does hurt to see him go a little bit. It's better for him. But most importantly, right now, entering 2025, the Warriors Junior Pathway and Development System will produce someone to take his spot. You can guarantee it. And maybe those players will be better. That's the Niche Cast for this week. Big up yourself. We appreciate your eardrums and eyeballs. Make sure you comment. Well, you can comment, but make sure you like and subscribe because that goes hard. Run up the views if you can, and just enjoy yourself. Probably get offline because that's what we're going to do. Enjoy the summer vibrations around Aotearoa and the world, and just do your best. How about that? Just do your best. Big up yourself. Love yourself. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Church.